Did what we ask our doctors to do. Don't overprescribe opioids. And unfortunately, for whatever reason, Jarvis made that choice to take his life,
leaving the entire community in mourning.
His personality was electric. I can tell you the one thing that we all have joked about, that Todd Graham will be the best dressed man in heaven.
Tragedy is such an understatement of what happened.
Officials have also told us there were two witnesses of the event in the parking lot. Jarvis approached them and told them to leave before he shot Dr. Graham.
Jen, did Jarvis's wife have any idea that this could happen?
Tonight, officials are saying she had no idea.
All right, Jen, thanks a lot.
All right. That is jacked up, y'all. Doctor lost his life because someone wanted opioids and he would not prescribe it. I tell you, just when you think things could not possibly get worse, these people show you they have an even worse nature about themselves. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. What? These drug death articles are plentiful, ladies and gentlemen. They really are. Number of fentanyl deaths in Massachusetts alarms state DEA. Mexican cartels are delivering vast quantities of inexpensive and powerful synthetic fentanyl to New England, causing the highest rate of fentanyl-related deaths in the nation, while creating a plague that the area's top drug enforcement officials describes is like no other epidemic he's ever seen. It's a pipeline that has often begins in China, wins through the cartels of Mexico, and flows into distribution cities such as Lawrence and Springfield. According to Michael J. Ferguson, the special agent in charge of the New England Field Division of the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration. Wow. It's packaged and shipped off to remote hamlets and other urban centers. In a candid and often a 90-minute alarming interview, Ferguson offered a detailed look at how fentanyl arrives in the region and an unsparing perspective on the way the drug destroys families and threatens entire communities. Fentanyl is manufactured death, Ferguson said. Wherever can be likened to a weapon of mass destruction and the effect it has on people, it's fentanyl. And you know what? China knows that. Really. And I'm not going to rule out that they're doing this mess on purpose. How do you topple a world domination? You drug them up. And then you become the world domination on the planet. Okay, the typical procure fentanyl or its chemical components from China, process it in Mexico into powder and pills, and then ship the synthetic product to local distributors. The result is menacing, anesthetizing foreign organized drug trade that is fueling a deadly crisis of addiction and stretching law enforcement to its limits. The introduction of fentanyl has changed the way we do business, Ferguson said during an interview at the agency Boston headquarters. It's like no other epidemic that I've come across in my 27 years at DEA. The opioid plague has ravaged nearly every part of the country, but New England has been especially hard hit. And I'm not surprised. There's, one thing about New England, it has a high Caucasoid population there. New Hampshire and Massachusetts rank first and second in per capita deaths caused by fentanyl, which has surpassed heroin as the leading cause of fatal opioid overdoses in those states. A seemingly endless black market supply that brings fentanyl to the smallest, most remote towns, sometimes at a street level, cost only a few dollars, has deepened the crisis. Even though the drug rarely originates in the United States, Ferguson said, often the opioid is mixed with heroin. We never had this proliferation of cartels in our backyard, Ferguson said. They travel back and forth, sending reps and associates to look out for their interests. Illicitly produced fentanyl also is obtained over the dark web. Oh, wow. All right. A shadowy internet market where the drug can be brought cheaply from China and other sources. Sometimes the opioids arrive undetected through the U.S. Postal Service, but about 80% of the fentanyl that reaches New England comes from Mexico, usually smuggled in vehicles across the vast southwest border, Ferguson said. That's how a lot of the drugs get in any given state in the U.S., actually, not just New England. From there, fentanyl hidden in secret compartments, sometimes in 18-wheelers carrying fruit and vegetables, are often driven straight to a city such as Lawrence, where the confluence of interstates 495, 93, and 95 means fentanyl can be handed off quickly during a short detour from the highway. Although cartels provide the infrastructure to dominate the market, the distribution of fentanyl in Lawrence and other New England cities generally falls to local drug traffickers and middlemen who, what they do is they mix in the fentanyl additives into the drug after it's handed off. So they're not going to stop this. Like I said, it's too many people involved in keeping drugs flowing into America. And since America has been here, there's been drugs here. Even the founding forefathers were using drugs, ladies and gentlemen. So it's always been in this country. I don't care how many agents they get out here. One thing about these drug cartels, they are very crafty in how they get these drugs into the country. They don't have to come across that border at all. And that's what America is missing. A lot of these drugs are now being mailed into the country through China, and it can't be detected by dogs. So now you got a flow of drugs that cannot be detected by your drug sniffing dogs. And in many cases, if they sniff these drugs, they die. What are you going to do? Seriously. Seriously, what are you going to do? So he's generally admitting that they really can't control these drugs coming in and flowing into the country from China and Mexico. And also another one that some of you might not have heard is the Dominican Republic is also involved in a lot of the profiteering of drugs going on in the US. And not to mention Canada. There's a lot flowing in from the Canadian border as well. I know Trump will always talk about Mexico, but there's a lot of drugs flowing down from Canada as well. So now you got drugs coming in from all borders of this country. You're not going to stop this, ladies and gentlemen. It is just an illusion for them to believe they are going to stop this epidemic, because they won't. It is just too many people involved in ensuring that drugs make it to the US. And when it's like that, you're not going to stop this thing from happening. It's inevitable. The US is doomed. You know, now they got doctors writing less script, but you didn't stop the street drug, which means the epidemic is not going to end at all. Whatever they can't get from their doctors, they will get from the streets. It's a fact. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, ladies and gentlemen, please do. Peace, family. In Ohio, it just seems like the deaths just don't stop going from this drug plague. And this is a shot of body bags, bodies just laying in this morgue, overdosed and overrun. A state of crisis in Ohio. Woo. Yeah, things are pretty desperate in Ohio. Their bodies were found in parked cars, hotel rooms, homeless camps, bathrooms, and hundreds of homes across Southwest Ohio. Thousands of local residents are overdosing, and hundreds have died from powerful lab-made opioids as the nation's heroin plague evolves in startling and deadlier ways. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, it has, said Newtown Police Chief Tom Simon, who also leads Hamilton County's Drug Coalition Law Enforcement Task Force. Potent synthetic opioids, including fentanyl and the elephant tranquilizer carfentanil, are rapidly replacing heroin as the top killer of local opioid users. A WCPO analysis of hundreds of death records revealed. And this chart is actually showing you between July 2016 and June 2017 how many people actually died in their county. That's a lot of people, man. Woo! The deadly drugs purchased in some cases by local dealers on the internet from illegal drug makers in Canada and China are 10 to 10,000 times more powerful than heroin, and they're flooding Ohio communities. On any given day, you can get at least a half a gram of free stuff, a tester, just by hanging out at a gas station, said Dennis Storer, a Coltrane Township resident and former Hamilton County Sheriff Deputy who has been in recovery since December. So he actually had a drug problem himself from prescription drugs. More than a decade ago, he became addicted to prescription painkillers after being injured on the job, he said. The swift shift in the illegal opioid supply is wreaking havoc in Ohio communities in countless others costly ways. Our entire state is in crisis. Ohio State Senator Rob Portman said during a June press conference in Cincinnati, Ohio's rate of overdose death is nearly double the national average. This plague knows no zip code. It affects all of us. All right, so things are dire in the state of Ohio, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the latest information on that state, which we know is really been getting slammed by this plague since it began. And it really is a dramatic shot looking at all these dead people that are actually in those body bags from drug overdose. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can, ladies and gentlemen, please make a donation to my channel. Peace, family. This is an article that I just did in my blog on July 21st, and this is on the death of 10-year-old Alton Banks down there in Miami, Florida. This is such a sad story. And it goes back to something I said about the junkies out here putting everybody at risk. and this 10-year-old lost his life from coming in contact with fentanyl between the pool party and on his way home. But no one knows exactly how he came in contact with fentanyl. Again, when you're around crowds, you're putting yourself at risk now, because there's always some junkie in the crowd with drugs, and it don't take much to kill you. Just a few grains of the drug can kill a person. So this is a serious tragedy right here. On June 23rd, Alton went to a local pool party down there in Florida. And when he returned home, his mom said he was vomiting. So later, family members found him completely unconscious. So they took him to the hospital and he was pronounced dead. So the investigators checked the mother's house. There was no drugs in the mom's house. So just, before some of you think the mother had the drugs, she did not. This mother does not have any history of being a drug addict at all. And she was said to be very distraught over the death of her son, which is the normal reaction of a mother that loves her child. The CDC says that accidental overdoses from fentanyl are not uncommon. And somewhere along the line, Alton touched this drug by maybe touching a surface or a towel that might have had residue on it, or he could have even picked up a cup if he was drinking a beverage at this pool party, and residue could have been on the cup. So, but nobody knows where this drug, how he came in contact with the drug, but it was definitely found in his system. So either the pool party or on his way back to his home in Overtown, the Miami-Dade Medical Examiner's Office is going to do more testing and a final report pending. Authorities don't generally disclose preliminary findings, but the Dade County State Attorney's Office agreed to comment publicly because of the unusual nature of the death and the need for tips in finding out how the boy might have come into contact with the drugs. So what they found was fentanyl and synthetic opioid, all right, which, a lot of people are buying on the streets. So it just goes into how many people are overdosing each year. All right, Chantel Banks, the mother of Alton, a 10-year-old Miami boy who may be among Florida's youngest opioid victim, posted this tribute to him on Facebook page. Miami detectives are investigating how he might have a potent painkiller that was found in his system, according to preliminary toxicology reports. And it's a shame. So tell me what you think. This is such a sad story. It is really sad. And, this kid gone for what? Gone for what? He should not be gone. He should be right here enjoying his life as a child. And his life got ripped away from some reckless person that had drugs, and he came in contact with it. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. An article that just came out today on Newsweek, and it's going over exactly what I have spoken about before. One way to end the opioid plague: let them die. I really believe that's what it's going to come down to. I really do. How do you sustain a life of a people that, number one, keep overdosing? It's the same people overdosing over and over and over and over. They're not trying to be productive. They're a strain on society. They're causing a public danger. They are not really contributing anything to society, but they're draining the society. So what do you do? And I really, as I stated before, believe there's going to have to be some hard decisions made even over the next year, because so many states are going broke from dealing with these junkies. While more Americans are coming around to the idea that drug addiction should be treated as a public health issue rather than a crime, the recent rise in opioid overdoses threatens this shift in public opinion, especially in areas most ravished by this new plague. In Cincinnati, my hometown, this is the author talking, 174 overdoses took place in less than a week last year. Many counties in Ohio no longer have enough room to store all of the bodies of overdose victims, forcing the state to lend out mobile morgues that are normally reserved for large-scale disasters. The lieutenant governor of the state has opened up about her family's struggle with opioid addiction. The desperation to end this plague has not brought out the best in everyone. Recently, Middletown, Ohio, City Councilman Dan Pickard proposed that paramedics not respond to addicts upon a third overdose. Critics decried the proposal as unbelievably cruel. Pickard countered that many didn't understand how bad the situation has gotten in his city, where out-of-the-box thinking was required. By Pickard's estimation, each overdose response cost the city $1,104. At this rate, he said, emergency services eventually won't be able to respond to other calls and the city is going to run out of money. And this is going to happen around the country. It's people got to keep adding money to the budget. Number one, for the Narcan. Number two, for the EMS. All of the emergency hospital visits, which have skyrocketed across the country. And you got all kinds of emergency responders, and there's a lot of places that are saying this is taking up all the time of the police and the fire department running to these overdose calls. They get so many in, the EMTs just can't do it alone without the fire department and the police department helping out in these situations. And a lot of them are working overtime because of the calls. There are cities that get over 30 calls a day, all overdosing victims. It's ridiculous. The city, meanwhile, is not even sure Pickard's proposal is legal. However, if lawyers determine that it is, it will come up for a city council vote. Should the proposal pass, supporters may be surprised at how little it does to stop the onslaught of drug overdose calls. Middletown Fire Department Chief Paul Lottie, a critic of the proposal, noted that 85% of the department's overdose runs involve first-time callers who would not be subjected to the 3 strikes rule. And this is a doctor that refused to prescribe opioids. But like I said, as long as you got the street drugs, they really don't need the opioids from the doctor, technically. Effective or not, the policy still raises ethical concerns. Paramedics should not become at the direction of ill-informed politician alabastards or who deserves to live or who deserves to die based on one's lifestyle choices, even the sorts of serial overdosers who grab headlines such as a Dayton, Ohio man who have been revived by paramedics 20 times do not deserve to just be left for dead in the streets. Addicts need access to treatment, not ultimatums, but those addicts are not going to treatments. And being that they are adults, how do you force them into treatment? You really can't. But seldom is treatment readily available. An arcane federal law has inhibited the growth of drug treatment centers in places where they are needed the most. Centers that accept Medicaid patients are prohibited from having more than 16 beds. With a population of less than 50,000, Middletown has already seen 577 doses in 2017 alone. Permitting drug treatment centers to expand at the local level would be a step in the right direction, giving addicts more opportunities to get the help they need and relieving pressure on emergency services in overcrowded jails. More treatment centers are only one part of the equation, of course. Currently, these centers are limited in what they can provide for addicts by America's outdated drug laws. When Switzerland experienced a heroin plague in the early 1990s, it started treating addicts with substitute therapy, using opiates like methadone to taper off addiction to other opiates, and even giving prescription heroin to some heavy users. It worked. Methadone treatment is becoming more common in the United States, despite being hampered by Medicaid rules regarding its use. But the nation is still a long way off from taking on major reforms like the Swiss did. In fact, the Drug Enforcement Administration is still sticking to its old ways of prohibiting any drugs that set their eyes on, including Crampton, another substitute drug addicts can use in place of more dangerous opioids. I never heard of that. Okay, well, that's a new one. I'm gonna have to look that one up. Crampton. I'm gonna look that one up. Despite the rhetoric of the DEA and other government regulators, drug prohibition has made many drugs like heroin far more dangerous than they would be otherwise. Large spikes in overdose deaths often involve influxes of heroin laced with synthetic opioids like fentanyl or carfentanil, which are far more potent than heroin itself. Because these drugs are brought on the black market, users have no way of knowing what they're really buying, and thus no way to adjust their dosing according with synthetics are in play. This doesn't seem to matter to the DEA. U.S. drug prohibition laws aren't set up to solve drug addiction so much as satisfy the need to punish what is viewed as bad behavior. Pickard himself said that the proposed 3 strikes rule for drug overdoses in Middletown is not a proposal to solve the drug problem. He said he wants to put fear in people thinking about overdosing in his town. But drug addiction makes people do irrational things. Addicts are not going to ask themselves if they're within Middletown city limits before shooting up. As long as politicians and government officials continue to view the opioid plague as a war to be fought against drug users rather than a battle to save them, many more lives will be lost. Okay, so we save them, and then what? Then you're going back out there to revive them again and again and again. So you're saying essentially just keep going out there endlessly and saving people that really don't want to be saved. All right. Let's go and listen to this video.
This summer, people are experiencing all the excitement Chevy has to offer. Holy smokes. I can't tell I'm holding it. For thrilling drives and deals at the Chevy Summer Drive. Find new roads at your local Chevy dealer.
We cannot just work to prevent future addicts. We're going to need to do more to help the millions that already exist, which means more investment in treatment programs, as well as increasing the availability of drugs like naloxone, commonly used in a nasal spray to rescue people from overdoses. Because, as this firehouse makes clear, it is a tool that they use with depressing frequency.
So every single firefighter in the Revere Fire Department knows how to use this, has been trained on this.
Yes.
And has used it.
Yes. From the chief down, we tend to have more overdoses than we do fires. So it's a piece of equipment that we can't go without now, just like we have the hose.
It's true. Firefighters might be more likely to use a nasal spray than a hose, which is really going to fuck up those hot firefighter calendars. Because something about an overdose reversing nasal spray isn't quite as sexy. It's still sexy, but just not quite as sexy. It is still sexy though, just not quite, but still, and that's not the point. The point is, there is no one simple answer here. Not all opioid addicts will respond to the same treatment, and not all people in pain will find relief from alternative therapies. This is going to take a massive effort and a significant investment. It won't be cheap, it won't be quick, and it won't be easy. And it is hard not to be angry at the drug companies like Purdue, whose promise of cheap, quick, easy pain solutions help put us in this mess. Because while they may not be solely responsible, if you were to ask me if they bear significant blame for reckless, greedy behavior which contributed to this massive public health crisis, I might not say yes exactly, but I would definitely say, uh-huh.
Yeah, but you know what? I understand what they're saying. But I have been on opioids even after surgery. And I have to say, I didn't get hooked like that. So it really does depend on the individual. And if you really don't want to do that, if it's not just within you to do those type of drugs, you won't. Me, I'm the kind of person, I don't even like taking a damn aspirin. Okay. If you gave me a pill right now, I would be reluctant about taking it. I'm just not a big pill taker, never smoked, and I sure ain't putting no shit up my nose. So it's just not for me. So what part of it is the drug addict's responsibility? You're blaming the pharmaceutical. You're saying it should not be a crime. So in my opinion, all the excuses you're coming up with is to take any responsibility from the person that's on the drug. Where when the crack epidemic happened, you had no problem blaming the dealer, blaming the crack user, blaming anybody, whether they were directly involved or indirectly involved. And I remember the crack bust. Cops would go into a house and anybody standing in that house was arrested. It didn't matter if you were not directly responsible for having the drug in the house. If you were there, you got arrested. Plain and simple. Where when it comes down to them, oh, let's just pat them on the head and say it's a public health issue. Well, at the rate that you're going, how are you going to ever make a difference in taking down the plague? You won't. You won't even do the right thing when it comes down to the addict. So, like I said before, there is no end in sight. And just the way they're handling things, that end ain't coming. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. All right, y'all. This is an article that just came out on July 20th, 2017 and Science Daily. And I'm going to post the link to this article in the description box. This is a different professor. And he is saying that it is not deaths of despair killing white Americans. Okay, he does not believe in that deaths of despair. He's saying that it's more opioids and obesity among white people that's killing them. Now, I have to kind of agree with that. When I go out in public, no defense, I see an awful lot of fat white people more than anyone else. And to be honest with you, I don't even believe their 3 meals a day thing is correct. I believe back when our people were in Africa and also in this country, before they arrived, people just ate to keep the body nourished. That was the important thing to do. These caucasoids eat entirely too much. I even live next to a Caucasian couple, and both of them are fat. And I'm just telling you, I just see more fat white people than anyone else. Followed by them are the Latinos. There's a lot of fat Latinos walking around too. Y'all seem to be the two groups that are the fattest in the U.S. Drug-related deaths among middle-aged white men increased more than 25-fold. Wow, that is crazy. Between 1980 and 2014, with the bulk of that spike occurring since the mid-1990s, when addictive prescription opioids became broadly available, according to new research. So this is a study published online today in the International Journal of Epidemiology. Also found, contrary to widely reported research findings, suicide and alcohol-related deaths are not to blame for increasing mortality rates among middle-aged whites. The results call into question the recent reports suggesting that what have become known collectively as despair deaths by suicide, alcohol, and drugs are on the rise among white Americans, particularly men, facing a lack of economic opportunity and an increase in chronic pain. So they're saying, based on pain and distress, explanation, raising the mortality rate among the white population, he's not quite buying it. Okay. Instead, recent mortality increases have likely been shaped by the U.S. opiate plague. Masters said metabolic disease, including heart disease, obesity, and diabetes, are also playing a key role. After years of declining deaths for such diseases, thanks to new drugs and procedures, progress has slowed for men and stalled for women, the study found. When it comes down to mortality, we are just starting to see the real health consequences of the obesity plague. And it is a plague. Seriously, the next time y'all go out in public, just look at the amount of fat white people you see. It's a lot of them. Okay? I would say it's probably just as many out of shape ones, probably even more than the ones that are in shape. But they are more out of shape than anybody else. And I'm glad this man is bringing that out, because for many years, they tried to imply it was black people, but I'm sorry. I see more black men that are in shape than I do see white men, and that is the truth. And I'm sure I'm not the only one that noticed that. In fact, I'm more likely to see a black man that is in good shape than I am to see a white man that's in good shape when I go out in public. All I see are these fat, slobbery-looking men that just look horrible. Master's and graduate students, Andrea Tilstra and Daniel Simon, launched a study in spring 2016 after papers revealed the following years of decline. U.S. mortality rates had begun to inch up among middle-aged white, non-Hispanic men and women. Follow-up studies suggest such increases were disproportionately driven by chronic liver disease, suicide, and overdoses, which some suggest were symptoms of the same underlying epidemic of emotional distress, economic insecurities, and chronic pain. One study published in 2015 in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science referred to despair deaths among a lost generation whose future is less brighter than their parents. But we know that. You know, many people are not living as well as their parents did because the incomes have dropped dramatically for a lot of the same jobs. The despair death narrative caught fire and has since begun to inform mortality research and media coverage and shape dialogue among policymakers and politicians. Yet our research shows it has, he just feels it's incorrect. He doesn't feel these are deaths of despair as it's been labeled. And again, I don't see how it's deaths of despair for them. You know, when Black people have gone through the highest unemployment rate since we've been here. But that's not considered a despair, but it's a despair when white people go through it. Give me a break. Y'all sound weak. For the new study, he looked at U.S. mortality data from the National Center for Health Statistics, the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, and the U.S. Census Bureau for U.S. non-Hispanic white men and women ages 25 to 34 and 35 to 54 from 1980 to 2014, while previous research had lumped men and women 10-year age spans and drug, alcohol, and suicide deaths together. Masters and his team disentangled the data sets, looking independently at genders, individual year ages, and distinct causes of death. They also distinguish between period effects, in which shifts in mortality rates were similar among all age groups, and cohort effect, in which the shifts were unique to individuals born in a particular time frame. One glaring pattern emerged among men and women of all ages cohorts studied. Drug-related deaths had skyrocketed. For instance, in 1980, 1.4 per 100,000 men and 1.76 per 100,000 women died from drug overdoses. By 1998, those numbers had climbed to 9.5 for men and 3.6 for women. By 2014, they'd risen to 36.5 to 24 for men and 24.4 for women. Wow, y'all some real junkies. Woo! Oh man, I'm looking out the window. This is kind of off topic. I'm looking out the window at the sunrise, and the sky is very, very pink out here. I don't think I've ever seen it this pink before. Okay. And meanwhile, the researchers found no substantive increases in white men's alcohol-related mortality at any time. Suicide rates did rise slightly between 1999 and 2014 for men and women, but this was due largely to spikes among all age groups during times of economic downturn. So whenever the economy goes bad or they're not working that much, this is when your Caucasoid will turn to suicide. That suggests economic insecurities are not isolated to a single lost generation. But look, Black people have been living through economic insecurities from day one. You don't see us killing ourselves. These people can't handle nothing. With drug-related mortality rates, it took off around the time when prescription opioids became readily available, and it has kept rising steadily ever since, Master says. The team in yet-to-be published research has also looked into the number of Black men and women and seen similar patterns of soaring rates of drug abuse across age cohorts since the late 1990s. We have no doubt that times of economic insecurity have severe consequences for a population's health, nor do we doubt that pain and distress can pose serious health problems, the author concluded. Yeah, but you know what? Black people do soar in drug abuse since the 90s, but we are still not dying at the same rate as the opioid and heroin and fentanyl. White people are dying. Y'all still outpace everybody in deaths. So I don't want him trying to leave that off. We are not dying at the same rate, period. However, taken together, our findings suggest that it is unlikely that recent trends in U.S. white men and women mortality rates have been driven by a plague of pain and rising distress. Instead, the author points to overprescription and overuse of opioid-based painkillers, heroin use, and okay, I'm just seeing what he has here. An obesogenic environment. So he's saying what their findings were when they went in and did a research was overprescription, misuse of opioids, which we know they're overdosing out here every day, heroin use, and obesity. That's what they find as the leading cause of the white mortality rate in this country. And he did not see all this deaths of despair and what they're talking about. He doesn't believe that's what it is. They hope their paper will encourage policymakers and researchers to explore those drivers and their solutions further. Okay, so this man does not agree with the deaths of despair. So he believes that the biggest killer that's happening to white Americans, and the reason why it's rising higher for them than anyone else, is mainly drugs, obesity, and suicide. So that's what's killing white Americans. Please leave your comments and subscribe, and if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. Opioid plague grows, so does the number of babies born addicted, ladies and gentlemen. So again, this plague ain't going nowhere. Okay, back in the day when a mother was addicted to crack and her baby was born, the Caucasoids gave them a title called crack babies. All right, that's what they wanted to call our kids, and that's what they did. So now their babies are coming out in even larger numbers, addicted to opioids because the mom takes the drug all throughout her pregnancy. And listen to how often these babies are born. This is long past crack babies, is what they wanted to call them. Okay, this is in Illinois, DuPage County, Illinois. The I-Team looked into the most heartbreaking development of the opioid plague, tiny lives that begin drug dependent. They can't just say no because they are babies born hooked in a birth fight because of their mother's addiction. Well, that was the same case with the black babies that were born addicted to crack. One baby born every 25 minutes in the United States is suffering from opioid withdrawal. That's a lot of babies, y'all. That's a lot of babies. One every 25 minutes, an opioid baby is born in the U.S. The syndrome has Illinois on the offense. Newborns cry, but one baby's high-pitched wails signal trouble. She entered the world dependent on addictive drugs, among the state's smallest victims of the opioid plague. The symptoms include fevers, irritability, and tremors. A baby you just can't keep from crying. So they actually cry around the clock when they're addicted to drugs. And this is why they keep the babies in the hospital for fear of abuse from the parents, because it's not like you're going to rock these addictive babies to sleep. It's not like that. It's very different from a normal baby. Okay, a baby you just can't keep from crying, who can't sleep, who's sweating, who's constantly rooting and looking for something to eat or suck. Described Dr. Jeffrey Loghead, NICU, medical director of NM Central DuPage Hospital. The use of opioids such as heroin, fentanyl, oxycodone, and codeine during pregnancy can result in withdrawal symptoms most people have likely never heard of. Medical experts call it neonatal abstinence syndrome, or NAS. At Central DuPage Hospital, the withdrawing infant is not alone. In the same week as her birth, 3 other newborns are going through withdrawal, diagnosed with the troubling syndrome. The hospital staff know the drill, and some babies need medicine to help with their pain. Clinical medicine therapists and volunteer cuddlers are also deployed. Okay, so they got people coming into the hospital and actually cuddling and holding these crying opioid babies. Okay. All right, so they're saying just in Illinois alone, they estimate up to 500 of these opioid babies being born a year. In the past few years, we've seen almost 50% increase in the number of cases across the state. The overall number really obscures the fact it's hitting in some communities much harder than others. I think that providers might be one of the first lines of defense in preventing this from becoming a worse epidemic that it already is. It is. If you got a opioid baby being born every 25 minutes in America, it's already an epidemic. It's already a plague. Shoot, that just like Tareen Rain said, it's a damn plague. So, doctors specializing in high-risk pregnancy watch for women who may be addicted. But while many would-be mothers are not hooked on heroin, a surprising number are still being prescribed habit-forming painkillers while they're pregnant. Why would you prescribe opioids to a pregnant woman? Oh my God, these people are insane. I would never. That is weird. Why would you give opioids, prescribe that to a pregnant woman? And then you want to know why you got an epidemic and babies born this way? Woo, man. The Caucasoid community is really jacked up, y'all. They are going through something real. The I-team obtained the 2016 data on dependent babies in Illinois, and the numbers are climbing. Between 2011 and 2016, the numbers are more than double in urban counties and more than triple in rural counties. The Illinois actually has far fewer cases of newborn drug syndrome than the national average. Wow. The head of Illinois Public Health and a special committee is now meeting to help physicians in hospital better identify and treat report cases of neonatal abstinence syndrome. Some babies need tiny amounts of morphine to help with the painful withdrawal. It's a long, drawn-out process of actually getting the baby to a stabilization phase and then working towards a weaning phase. These babies stay in the hospital for a very long time, said the NICU nurse. They have to keep them there because if they go home, those babies are either going to die or they're going to be badly abused because of the crying around the clock that they do. The average hospital stay for a healthy baby costs about $3,500. For babies of drug-addicted mothers, it is $66,000. Oh my God. Whoa. I'm telling you. Now, not only are these heroin and opioid addicts draining the resources, their babies are draining the resources too. So if you have a healthy baby, the hospital cost is $3,500. If you have a baby hooked on opioids, it costs $66,000. Oh my. Woo! America ain't gonna have no money left. Researchers are now zeroing on the long-term effects of being born drug dependent. Wow. Wow, see, I learned something in this article. I didn't know it cost that much money to keep an addicted baby in the hospital. Woo, draining the resources. Now, they've been trying to claim that Black people are on more welfare, although they are on the most welfare, and we were draining the American economy. No, there is no one draining the economy more than these drug addicts and now your babies that are addicted to heroin and opioids. You're the drain on society. Please leave your comment and subscribe, and if you can donate to this channel, please do. This is an article that just came out on Newsmax, and it's talking about the strong comeback that meth is making. In fact, there are some that are projecting that meth may actually overtake the opioid plague that's going on in the U.S. So meth surges in U.S. in shadow of opioid plague. Meth is surging in the U.S. again in the shadow of the opioid plague and may not be getting the attention it deserves, says law enforcement officials. Ohio, one of the main battlegrounds in opioid plague fight, also finds itself fighting methamphetamine's resurgence, authorities told NBC on Wednesday. Texas, Montana, Minnesota, Oklahoma, Iowa, and South Dakota are seeing new spikes in meth. All of a sudden, it's everywhere again, says Wisconsin Attorney General Brad Schmiel, who commissioned a study of meth in his state. It's estimated that meth use there jumped by at least 250% since 2011 and could overtake heroin. We are entering another full-blown plague with meth, Schmiel told NBC News. According to the National Institute on Drugs, methamphetamines is a stimulant drug usually used as a white, bitter-tasting powder or a pill. Crystal methamphetamines is a form of the drug that looks like glass fragments or shiny bluish white rocks and is chemically similar to amphetamines. The Institute said other common names for the drug include chalk, crank, crystal, ice, meth, and speed. The nonprofit news website Oklahoma Watch reported in March that meth was the biggest contributor to drug overdose deaths in the state in 2016. The 952 people who died from drug overdoses in Oklahoma that year was a state record. Meth was connected in 328 of the deaths, up sharply from 271 in 2015, and topping deaths from the much publicized opioid hydrocodone and oxycodone. Their concurrently problematic Jessica Hawkins prevention director for the Oklahoma Mental Health Department, told Oklahoma Watch about the state's meth and opioid problems. We don't want to what we don't want to do is watch. In other words, what she's saying is you don't want to take the attention off of one epidemic and start focusing on another. A news report by the Oklahoma-Idaho High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program said death connected to meth outdistanced that of all other drugs in 2015. The latest date available reported. The report, which blames the increase on the Mexican drug traffickers, said the meth also was involved in the most drug arrests in Oregon in 2016, with 15,308 arrests, doubling from 2009. We're seeing it pour across the border in bigger quantities. And the deputy of the U.S. Attorney General in Southern California told NBC News where meth border seizures in San Diego County jumped from 3,585 kilograms in 2012 to 8,706 kilograms in 2016. It used to be that loads of 20, 30, and 40 pounds were big for us. Now we have 200 pounds loads. Okay, so they're bringing more meth in from across the border. But make no mistake, there are still meth labs all throughout the U.S. They're still making it in these houses. Usually they'll do it in a garage, or I've even heard of apartments where they'll make a meth lab anywhere they can. So, not one, ladies and gentlemen, but two plagues hitting the U.S. And they're not even doing a good job in battling the opioid epidemic and heroin that's going on out here. Now you got to throw in meth that's surging all over the place. I tell you what, I would never want to be an emergency responder, cop, or work for the fire department in this climate out here today. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. A week ago, I did a story on a sheriff in Ohio that refused to allow his officers to carry Narcan. He doesn't feel that it should be the job of the police to revive people. It should be the emergency squads doing that. Well, his refusal to carry Narcan has now sparked protest, and it's very divided. There are some people that do agree with him and some that simply don't. They think that, I guess as a public servant, they should be carrying Narcan. So, opposite corners, opposite views. A protest pushing for Butler County deputies to carry naloxone or Narcan, the medicine used to revive opioid overdose victims at the Butler County Courthouse in Hamilton, drew people on both sides of the issue. They stood across the street from one another, shouting and waving to motorists as they passed through the busy intersection of Martin Luther King Boulevard and High Street in downtown Hamilton. According to the event on Facebook, the demonstration was sparked by comments from Butler County Sheriff Rick K. Jones, who says his deputies have never carried it, and that's not changing. A declaration that drew national press coverage. Deputies and law enforcement officers in surrounding Warren, Clinton, and Hamilton County carry the opioid overdose reversal drug. So you can see in the picture the protesters that are out. Okay, and you see another one down here. Truckers for Jones. Police are not doctors. Heroin addiction can buy their own Narcan. Police do not give medicine. So the town is very divided on this. And you can see some people want the sheriff deputies to carry the Narcan and some don't. Sheriff Jones, have a heart, carry Narcan, saves lives, be part of the solution. Narcan is not a solution, by the way. All that is you're just reviving them so they can go out and get high again. And here's another one. Hey, hey, ho, ho, Sheriff Jones has got to go. You know, where was all of this when blacks were going through the crack epidemic? I didn't see this outpour from any of these caucasoids that you see today. I didn't see this. All right, there is a video up here. Let's see if we can get it to play. Pardon the commercial.
Used vehicles from 8 franchises in one location at the Jeff Weiler Eastgate Auto Mall on Route 32. Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram, Chevrolet, Kia, Nissan, and Mazda. Plus, you'll find the used car megastore offers more.
It's an everyday occurrence with these drug overdoses. It is just, it's sapping a lot of our police officers off the street because we're constantly going to pretty much the same people over and over again.
If they can shoot you with an Narcan, that will stop the effect of the heroin, and then whatever else it's laced with, you can deal with.
In downtown Cincinnati, I see a lot of people snorting it rather than shooting it up. They don't want to get caught with a needle and get charged then with that needle. Because unfortunately, I can't charge them if they snort it because my drug is gone.
The drug has so much control over them that being Narcan and bringing back to life is not affecting them to stop. They know we're going to come and they know we're going to Narcan them and we're going to bring them back to life.
Hey, there you go. We're the fire department. We just saved your life.
It's all the time now. I mean, every day almost you're coming into a heroin overdose.
I like seeing some type of treatment, so be honest.
You know, at first, I think a lot of officers did have some compassion. Now it's hard because we see the same thing day in and day out, and there's a lot of individuals out there that do not want help. I mean, I've only had a couple in my career willing to really get help.
It's overwhelming for the firefighters. Big fatigue factor. And our goal is to try to get them to the hospital. We can't transport them; they refuse to go.
I feel sorry for the firefighters. They are bringing these people back to life, and then we're done and we walk away because we don't have anything. We can't arrest them. Unfortunately, we can't arrest them for just being high on heroin or because we had to Narcan them. That's not an offense, and there's nothing really we can do. So they walk away. And I think the firefighters get a little frustrated, like, why aren't the police doing anything? But our hands are tied. We can't.
You know, it's amazing how
Shop 2000.
It's amazing how their hands are tied when it comes down to these caucasoids. You know, their hands are tied. I find that very amazing. And I'm offended by that because they're saying if they don't see evidence of the drug and they're just high, they can't arrest them. But they sure did not draw those distinctions when it came down to Black people during the crack epidemic. If you looked high, you went to jail. Whether they caught you with the paraphernalia or the actual drug or not, you went to jail. But they got all these stipulations in place when it comes down to the heroin addict. Oh, well, we can't just arrest them. Well, why not? You just arrested the crack addict. You know, But, you know, it's a plague that's affecting white people. So now they want to handle everybody with kid gloves. And I understand what the people that work for these emergency squads and fire departments, you know, you're going out to the same person over and over. I did an article maybe like 2 weeks ago on how they went out for the same person 20 times in 1 week. 20 individual times they went out with Narcan to bring a person back. This is why there was a city councilman that came forward and said they wanted 3 strikes you're out for these calls, these 911 calls, because they're spending their entire day going to the same people, overdosing over and over and over. And the Narcan, that just brings them back. It only works for like 30 minutes, but it's not curing the, you know, the drug addiction. As far as I'm concerned, it's encouraging them to do it because they know somebody's going to always come to revive them. So what incentive does the drug addict have to even stop? There's none. This is why this plague is not going anywhere, ladies and gentlemen. I say that on all my videos, and I'm going to continue to say it. And right now, Caucasian society, they're enablers. The ones that are not doing the drugs, they're enabling it because they want these junkies accommodated. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. All right. This message is for white America. White America, you are not struggling with one plague, but 2 simultaneously. One is the opioid addiction, which we already know you can't get any control over. The second is meth. Both of these drugs are simultaneously plaguing the U.S. at this time. Okay? The leading cause of death in the U.S. is from opioid addiction from white Caucasoid people 50 and under. All right, so you can talk about black on black crime and black on white crime, which is all laughable for you to even bring these things up when your community is being completely devastated by drugs. So you can sit there and be stupid all you want, but the bottom line is this whole epidemic in this country, you can't even control it, and nor can you control your people that are running out here after these drugs. So the way I see it, you don't have anything to say to anyone as long as you got this mess going on in your country. But it's amazing how y'all want to open your mouth to black people when you really have no right to do any of those things at all. So really, this plague going on in the country is well known worldwide. There is no one on this planet that don't know about the bad drug addiction, horrific really, in the United States. While the numbers illustrate the magnitude of the problem, they can also mask the ways in which drug use and abuse is subject to local trends. For the Twin Cities, understanding contemporary drug policy means acknowledging that opioids are the beginning, though not necessarily the end, of law enforcement focus. Although the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area has seen a notable uptick of overdose deaths, the state has yet to see the grim totals making headlines in Appalachia. In 2014, 319 people died from opioid overdoses. Although the number seems low, it marks an increase of more than 500% since 1999. For years, heroin barely registered on law enforcement's radar in Minnesota. In 2008, the state reported fewer than 10 heroin overdose deaths. By 2015, it had more than 100. The scope of the problem has law enforcement on edge. Although heroin use is up nationwide and the supply of the drug in the Twin Cities has increased, the growth in heroin use has been dwarfed by the resurgence of interest in methamphetamines. Admission to treatment facilities for methamphetamine addiction began to rise in 2010 and quickly overtook the previous records established 10 years earlier. What we are seeing in the data is alarming. Methamphetamine's use is now second only to alcohol for treatment admissions in Minnesota, said the Department of Human Services Commissioner Emily Piper. Although methamphetamines has lost the culture cachet it had in the early 2000s, when the health and safety hazard of living in or near a cookhouse where concerns for many residents, it has not lost its popularity. In May of 2016, police raided a home in Brooklyn Center and northwestern suburbs of Minneapolis and seized approximately 140 pounds of methamphetamines. It was the largest methamphetamine seizure in the state history and the result of a year-long investigation by a multi-county drug task force. So in Minnesota, they're getting slammed by the meth, and in a big way, apparently, in this particular state. But meth is actually growing all over the country. It's now right behind opioids as far as a plague is concerned. 488 pounds of methamphetamine seized by law enforcement in 2016 was nearly 5 times the amount confiscated in 2009. If 2009 marked a low point in the methamphetamine trade, 2016 shows that methamphetamines is again becoming a drug of concern. Not only did 2016 seizures set a new state record, they doubled the amount seized in 2015. In fact, in Minnesota, methamphetamine addiction is second only to alcohol abuse treatment admission, whereas in 2005, the previous peak, 6,703 people were admitted to treatment facilities around the state for methamphetamine addiction. By 2016, the number of admissions stood at 11,555, an increase of 72%. Wow, that's a big jump. The 2016 numbers showed the continuation of an upward spiral that began to accelerate in 2015, according to the state report on drug abuse trends in the Minneapolis-St. Paul metro area. Although heroin use accounted for the bulk of drug seizures, arrest, overdose, and admissions to treatment facilities, methamphetamines was growing in popularity. Okay, methamphetamines was reported in 35% of all drug items seized by law enforcement in the 7-county metro area in 2015, and seizures statewide remained at heightened levels. The report continued. So, look like what they're saying is Minnesota seems to be the state that have the biggest amount of methamphetamines as far as a problem with trafficking and addiction to that drug. In the first 3 months of 2017, the same agency seized 118 pounds of drugs, a trend that, if it continues, would put seizures at more than 750 pounds by the end of the year. Wow. During the height of the previous methamphetamine epidemic, the drug was generally cooked up in local labs. So these are homes that they made into meth labs. And you know what the worst part is? Here in New Jersey, they sold these houses. And when people would move in, the whole family would immediately get sick. And by law, they're supposed to tell you if a house was once previously used as a meth house, but they're so desperate for money that they don't even tell these families anymore. And they don't find out until they move in and everybody gets sick, including the family pets. I have read these stories before. So you have to really just research before you make any purchases or even rent a house out, especially a house, because they're more notorious in doing this in a house than in an apartment. Okay. Unfortunately, so the meth is also sold at a very low cost, which is another reason why it's growing in popularity. The state officials are looking into several possibilities to explain this, including the lack of public awareness of the dangers of methamphetamine use and difficulty accessing heroin. People were aware of the dangers of methamphetamines. Brian McCourt, statewide gang and drug coordinator of the Department of Public Safety, told the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. For a variety of reasons, we had other drugs, whether to be synthetic, whether be it heroin, whether it be opiates, come to the forefront, that I think some that anti-methamphetamine messaging has not been heard as loud as it should. Methamphetamines is bad. Taking advantage of federal programs which allow for cooperation between law enforcement agencies and different states, Minneapolis area law enforcement has been able to work with agencies in Wisconsin to shut down a pipeline bringing meth from Chicago into the Twin Cities. However, they realize that the fight is yet over, since new suppliers will crop up to replace those arrested and taken off the streets. And that's the same problem they're having with heroin. As soon as they arrest a whole bunch of people, there's always new people popping up and selling and trafficking the drug. So again, it doesn't matter what they do when they can't even win the battle on the street level. And we already know this from the heroin and opioid plague that's going on. But please tell me what you think in the comment section. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. You know, this is one thing that makes me laugh. The Caucasoid is always telling us Black folks that we got low IQs. But when you see the things they do and realize they can't catch on to things too quickly, I wonder, do they often look in the mirror and say, maybe I got a low IQ? You know, the IQ test is biased, it's dumb. And every time you mention it, you sound like an idiot. So let's see how where the high IQs are going with this. Opioid prescriptions fall, but still high, CBC. You know why? Because, see, the people that don't get the prescriptions just goes to the the alternative market, which is your black market drugs out on the street. They don't need your scripts. What part of that don't you understand? The epidemic is still going strong and these doctors are not writing as many scripts. What does that tell you? That means that the average junkie is now going to street drugs. They don't need the doctor's script. This is why the epidemic is not slowing down, high IQ. My goodness. And length of prescriptions went up, raising risk of addiction among patients. And this came out on July 6th on WebMD. Prescriptions for opioid painkillers have dropped since 2010 in the United States, but the number of Americans getting the highly addictive medication is still too high, a new report says. Prescription declines from a peak of 782 morphine milligrams equivalent per person in 2010 to 640 morphine milligram equivalents per person in 2015, according to researchers from the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. Half of U.S. counties saw a decrease in the amount of opioids prescribed per person from 2010 to 2015, said CDC acting director Ann Schuchat. Overall, opioid prescribing in the United States is down 18% since 2010, but the amount of opioids prescribed in 2015 was still about 3 times that of 1999, the Center for Disease Control researchers said, with many people being provided lengthy prescriptions of the narcotic at high doses. All right. And you know what makes me laugh? This reminds me of the last time I was on opioids after having some surgery done. And I got a 7-day supply. And this is what the doctor told me. That's all I'm allowed to give. You know, he said, by law, we're just allowed to give you 7 days. And then when I went back to work, around that same time, it was another woman in my office that had a surgical procedure done. When I pulled out my bottle of oxycodone and she pulled out hers, we had the same medication. I had this little amber bottle with a 7-day supply. She pulled out this mega sized bottle. I kid you not. She probably had the same drug with about 30 days supply in it. So then I knew they prescribed the Caucasoid a lot more of the medication than us. I only got 1 week. She had like a 30-day supply. But this doctor lied to me and said by law they were only allowed to give 7 days. But I kind of chuckle at it now that I see the epidemic going on. You know, he did me a real favor because I never got hooked on that mess. We're still seeing too many get too much for too long. The amount of opioid prescribed in 2015 was enough for every American to be medicated around the clock for 3 weeks. Drug overdoses account for just over 52,400 deaths in 2015, and nearly 2 of 3 overdoses involved an opioid, according to the CDC. Now, I'm not surprised that they give medication out like that, because you got to understand, the doctors get money for every prescription they write from the pharmaceutical company. So the more they push the drug, the more money they get from those drugs. Again, their biggest money comes from writing prescriptions. It does not come from you walking in for your doctor visit. It's the prescription. That's where the money is. Prescriptions are still providing high doses of opioid painkillers such as OxyContin for periods long enough to turn patients into addicts. People are being handed opioid prescriptions that cover longer periods of time, increasing an average 13 days in 2006 to almost 18 days in 2015, the report found. Anyone taking opioids can become addicted to them after taking them just a few days. A person becomes more likely to take them long term. I don't know about that. I don't think when I took mine, I don't recall becoming addicted or craving for it. You know, I don't know. Maybe, I don't know. I just didn't feel that way. Taking even a low dose of opioids for more than 3 months increases the risk of addiction by 15 times. Patients are being prescribed dangerously high levels of opioids, even though the average daily dose prescription decrease by 58 MME in 2010 and 48 MME in 2015. So it looks like they decreased the strength of the drug, but people are still addicted to it. It did not make any difference. So, but I do know just from reading articles, a lot of people are now turning to the synthetic opioids and the fentanyl now. You know, they're not even sweating the fact that they can't get the script from their doctor anymore. Number two, if you want a lot of this stuff, you can get it from the black market. If you go onto the black internet, you can get all of this stuff you want. And not only that, if you get it from China, China will ship this stuff right to your house. They don't care. And they're getting away with it big time. Big time. And the U.S. still have not figured out a way to stop all these packages from coming over from China, because it's not like your dogs can sniff it out. Your dogs are pretty much useless when it comes down to sniffing out fentanyl. They can't. So I'm afraid to let the U.S. know you are stuck with this epidemic, this plague. You are stuck with it. It ain't going nowhere. I don't care how much they decrease these scripts, how much they decrease the dosage, how much they're careful about giving 13 days instead of 18 days. It's not going to make any difference when you got so much illegal drugs coming into the country. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. And I'll also have the link to this article in the description box. Peace, family. All right, this story just came out on July 3rd. More Americans are in treatment for opioids, but plague keeps growing. More and more people are being treated for opioid addiction, according to 2 new reports, but not nearly enough to slow the plague down. Medicaid spending on several prescription medicines used to treat opioid addiction more than doubled nationwide in the last 5 years, accelerating between 2015 and 2016. An Urban Institute analysis of federal data found the vast majority of the money was spent in states such as Pennsylvania and New Jersey that opted into the Affordable Care Act, Medicaid expansion. Republican proposals in both the Senate and House would roll back the expansion, but drug treatment spending has emerged as a possible area of compromise, especially for senators in states devastated by addiction. A separate report from the Blue Cross Blue Shield Association found a nearly 400% increase in diagnosis of opioid use disorder in the last 5 years. Both analyses were released last week. Blue companies across the nation collectively cover 106 million people, the single largest chunk of commercial health insurance. But addiction hits the poor especially hard, and the federal government has turned out to be a critical source of funding for treatment. Much of it covered by Affordable Care Act Medicaid expansion. The Blues report also looked at links between opioid prescriptions and use disorders. It found that people who receive high doses of prescription pain medicines, the equivalent of more than 65 milligrams of oxycodone, or 100 milligrams of hydrocodone a day, were more likely to end up addicted even when the prescriptions was less than 90 days. I have never had a prescription for 90 days when I was on those pills. I don't think I had anything beyond 7 days. Only 7% of the prescription regimens in the report were for high doses, but those patients were up to 43 times more likely to be diagnosed with an addiction disorder than patients filling scripts for lower doses. The Blues data also show that women of all ages were more likely to be prescribed opioids than men, with the biggest gap among middle-aged patients. But men were more likely to be diagnosed with an opioid use disorder through their mid-40s. Among people older than that, however, women were more likely to run into trouble. Blues subscribers in New Jersey and Pennsylvania were below the national average on 3 measures of opioid use and diagnosed use disorder. Yet members in both states who got treatment were more likely to receive medication that have been shown to reduce the chances of relapse. Rates of opioid use were highest in the Southeast and in Appalachia. The Blues report found while the use of medicine that helped people stay off drugs was lowest in those regions. The Urban Institute report focused on Medicaid coverage of medications used to treat opioid use disorder or reverse overdose, but it contained no data at all on methadone maintenance, which is regulated separately from all other drugs. Medicaid spending, all right, let me just go down a little. All right, here we go. The report included spending on emergency overdose reversal medication, naloxone, including the brand name spray Narcan, which New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and many other states have made widely available as a lifesaver over the last few years. Medicaid spending on that was up 900 times nationwide. Democrats, moderate Republicans, and a united front of medical organizations have grown increasingly alarmed about the potential impact on addiction treatment and overdose deaths if the Medicaid expansion is rolled back, as outlined in both the Senate and House health care plans. The Wolf administration has estimated that 1/5 of the more than 700,000 Pennsylvanians who have gained coverage through the expansion have used it for substance abuse treatment. According to the Congressional Budget Office, spending on Medicaid in 2 decades would be about 1/3 lower than it is now if the Senate GOP plan were to take effect. That proposal from Majority Leader Mitch McConnell had included $2 billion over 10 years specifically for the opioid plague. By the time senators left for a 10-day holiday break, he reportedly had agreed to moderates' demands for $45 billion. But estimates of the cost of treating Medicaid patients with opioid addiction and disease that can help spread, such as hepatitis C, go as high as $183 billion over the next decade. The trajectory is unknown, says Lisa Clemens Cope, a health economist and co-author of the Urban Institute report. Clearly, treatment is not keeping up with need, even given these big increases. Cutting Medicaid, she said, could have really devastating effects for families and communities and states. Well, I guess pretty soon we should know the outcome of what Trump care is going to be like. And these people are scared. They are scared and they're desperate, and they know if Trump cut a lot of money out of Medicaid, you can wave goodbye to a lot of these junkies. They're not going to make it. And it's not going to be enough funding for states to keep treating these people. So that's a problem. This is why so many of them are putting up a fight over, what the outcome is going to be as far as Trump's healthcare bill. So I'll keep you updated. Please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Okay, y'all, this is a report that came out of CBS in Pittsburgh. The coroners have seen synthetic opiates like fentanyl mixed with marijuana. Now, in my personal opinion, I think this is from marijuana being sold on the black market. Now, I could be wrong, but this is what I'm thinking, because I don't think the norm going out on the street or buying your marijuana from certain dealers, I don't really think it's them. I really think these are synthetic opioids because, fentanyl and all types of synthetic opioids are heavily sold on the black market. And I think that's where this marijuana is coming from, that's laced with fentanyl. So but you can tell me what you think in the comment section. I think as long as you're not buying it from the black market, you should be okay with the marijuana out here. So let's get into this story. Synthetic opiates like fentanyl have been found in marijuana, an Ohio coroner said Monday. Fentanyl, which is 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine, has been attributed to the increasing number of fatal overdoses across the U.S. The drug has been found in other drugs across the country, most notably in Ohio. we have seen fentanyl mixed with cocaine, and that is, y'all, I'm telling you, I live in New Jersey, and I can tell you up in New York, they are dropping like flies. The cocaine users, they're dying because apparently they're being sold cocaine with fentanyl, and these dealers are not telling them fentanyl is in it. So when they go to snort it, they are overdosing, and in many cases, they are dying. The problem is really bad in New York. We have seen fentanyl mixed with cocaine. We have also seen fentanyl mixed with marijuana, said Hamilton County Coroner Dr. Lampme Sam Marco during a joint press conference with Senator Bob Portman, Republican, Ohio. About 300 deaths have already been attributed to suspected opioid overdoses in Hamilton County this year, compared to 403 confirmed deaths through 2016, Sam Marco said. But the Hamilton County Coroner's Office has yet to report any deaths related to fentanyl-laced marijuana. It's nearly impossible to determine which drugs are laced with a synthetic opioid, Sam Marco said. Essentially, the message we've tried to get out there is if you are using any form of street drug, count on them having some form of synthetic opioid mixed in, she said. The U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration spokesman Melvin Patterson said the agency has not confirmed the existence of fentanyl in marijuana. In regards to marijuana, I'm not familiar with that, he told Cincinnati Enquirer. There could be. The Ohio Coroner's Office in Montgomery County previously ran out of space for dead bodies twice this year due to the opioid plague. A record of 3,050 Ohio residents died from the fatal overdoses last year, most of which were caused by heroin or painkillers. Tell me what you think. Personally, like I said, I believe this is black market marijuana that people are buying, and it's laced with fentanyl. But you just tell me what you think. I'm going to go ahead and play this video.
Deaths from prescription painkillers have more than quadrupled since 1999, according to the Centers for Disease Control.
Health reporter Stephanie Stahl is here now with what experts say could help lessen the opioid addiction.
That's right, guys. 91 Americans die every day from an opioid overdose, according to the CDC. Doctors are looking at alternatives to addictive prescriptions for treating pain. And with medical marijuana legal in many states now, advocates say legalizing it across the country could help curb the nation's drug crisis. Christine Stenquist suffered through a brain tumor, fibromyalgia, and debilitating headaches, chronic pain, which led to 45 different prescription drugs.
Migraines were just constant. So they started me on a lot of pharmaceuticals, and that went on for about 16 years.
Between the pain and the opioids, the mother of four was left bedridden. Eventually, she decided to give medical marijuana a try.
This is just a whole different lifestyle. I'm eating healthier, I'm more active, more alert.
Stenquist is one of a growing number of Americans who've traded in their powerful and addictive painkillers for the green alternative. Research in the Journal of the American Medical Association shows in states where medical marijuana is legal, opioid overdose deaths are down as much as 25%. The DEA still warns of a high potential for abuse, and Attorney General Jeff Sessions has described marijuana as only slightly less harmful than heroin.
I reject the idea that we're going to be better placed if we have more marijuana.
But Carla Rosati Vasquez treats pain patients and disagrees.
I've had patients that since they have been using their vaporizers with cannabis, for example, they've decreased their use in Ambien, they've decreased their use on clonazepam, on Percocet. Within 6 months, I was driving. Within 8 months, I was trying to figure out how to pass a law in my state.
Stenquist knows in her home state of Utah, that could be an uphill battle. Now, medical cannabis is legal in 29 states, including here in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware. Those programs provide access to patients with a legally approved serious medical condition, and they have to have a prescription.
Okay. Tell me what you think in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. I personally, like I said, I think this is
just an hour south of Pittsburgh in the Laurel.
That won't even turn off. Okay, just tell me what you think in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, everyone. You know, I had a troll come to me recently and said, why don't I talk more about black-on-black crime? Because black-on-black crime is not the leading problem in America. Although you caucasoids in your propaganda machine, the mainstream media, try to make it appear that way. But some of us that are way, way more awakened and we are aware of what's going on in America, you're not going to pull that one over on us. So if you need to hear about black-on-black crime, I suggest you go to another channel. On this channel, we are going to focus on what the biggest problem is in America, and that is your opioid plague. Not only is it a problem, ladies and gentlemen, in America, it is the biggest drug problem on earth. America leads the world in drug overdose deaths by a lot. And this article came out on Vox.com, June 28th, 2017. America has about 4% of the world's population, but 27% of the world drug overdose deaths. That, ladies and gentlemen, is pretty sad. America has the biggest drug overdose deaths in the entire planet. And these are mostly caucasoids. Black people are not leading in drug deaths in America. Not even close. We're not even close to you. Although you're trying to make the 4% of the black people that are on opioids a big deal, but we know that's not a big deal. Your deaths have far exceeded that. That's one of the startling conclusions from a recent report by the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime. Statista charted the result, and as you can clearly see, the U.S. is in the lead. North America, so this now filters in Canada because the caucasoids up in Canada are also having a problem. And as you can see, all the way down the chart, do you know South Africa is also having an opioid problem, ladies and gentlemen? They deserve it. They deserve it. Okay. The U.S. has always been ahead of much of the world in drug overdose deaths for a variety of reasons. For one, Americans are relatively wealthy, so they can afford to buy drugs. But there's also appears to be a cultural and socioeconomic factors at play, driving a broader increase in deaths of despair, such as suicides, alcohol, drug overdose deaths in recent years. And we know all this stuff. Oh, jobs went overseas, poor healthcare access, that kind of stuff. We already know that. But recently, America has gotten much worse in its massive opioid plague, which has contributed to a huge spike in drug overdose deaths over the past decades. In 1999, fewer than 17,000 people died from drug overdoses. In 2015, that grew to more than 52,000 people. This is why I don't talk about black-on-black crime, because black-on-black crime is not the problem in America. It is the Caucasoids on drugs is your biggest problem in America. Not only are you the biggest junkies, you are the biggest nuisance out in society. Your drug addicts are causing all kinds of car accidents. They have killed people out on the road. They have injured people. They have jumped the curb and ran people over. Your junkies are robbing pharmacies. They're robbing banks. They're robbing people's homes. So you're not just being a drug addict, but being harmless to everybody. You are being a complete nuisance and also a killer as a junkie. That's the problem, not black-on-black crime. This is, for now, largely a white American problem. Okay, I'm going to throw it in there because that's what it is. After pharmaceutical companies heavily market their opioids in the US and doctors followed through with massive numbers of prescriptions, America became the world's leader in consuming opioids, with UN data putting the US at the top of the opioid consumption. And as you can see in the dark blue on top, America just trumps all other countries on earth when it comes down to drug overdose deaths, including Canada. Canada's right behind because they're part of North America. The same drugs that are being trafficked into America is being brought into Canada as well. Okay, these folks have no right to talk to any black person about black-on-black crime or this fabricated black-on-white crime and all this other stuff that you could try to put on the black community. Okay, calling us niggers is not the worst thing that can happen, but your drug deaths are certainly far worse than being called a nigger, okay? So all of your little bags of tricks that you got is just simply not going to work. And I laugh because, see, these Caucasoids are also upset because the world don't like them like they used to. Not only are they taking a lot of criticism here in America, they're taking a lot of criticism outside of America. They're getting called out on a lot of things. And they are so fragile. They are upset that the world just don't love them like they used to. And it serves them right. What have you done to deserve to be loved by everybody? Not a damn thing. So what you're getting, you deserve every ounce of it. Okay, America leading the entire globe in drug deaths, ladies and gentlemen. Pass it on, ladies and gentlemen, pass it on. But don't let them get in your face again with no black-on-black crime. That's not leading in anything in America. I don't care how much they keep trying to fake it up on their media. All right, the two charts then are closely tied as America consumed more opioids and the drug overdose deaths climb. So it began to dominate the world on a very grim statistic. Okay, so in 2015, Americans died of drug overdoses more on that year than, any other time, which was 52,000 deaths. And that same year, there were 38,000 people that died in car crashes, 36 died from gun violence, 36,000 died from gun violence, and 43,000 and HIV/AIDS during the epidemic's peak in 1995. So they have far exceeded any black-on-black crimes that another black person died at the hands of a black person. Black-on-black crime deaths have pretty much been leveled for the past few decades. The last time I looked, it was like 4,300 black people died at the hands of another black person. And they got the nerve to make a big deal out of that when 52,000 of them died in 2015. And they got the nerve to come and talk about some black-on-black crime. These people are a joke. They are so stupid. This is the latest drug plague. However, is not solely about illegal drugs. It began, in fact, with a legal drug. And we know that. The doctors prescribing the opioids, and then they turn from that to the heroin and the fentanyl out on the street. We know that. That's like old news for people on my channel. Painkillers proliferated, landing in the hands of just not patients, but teens rummaging through their parents' medicine cabinet. You know what? When I was a teenager and my parents were on medicine, because I had both my mom and dad in the house. I didn't grow up in a single family home that a lot of you caucasoids also try to imply by black people. We all have fathers, okay? We couldn't have got here without a father. I never thought of rummaging through any medicine cabinet looking for drugs to take. I just never did that as a teenager. In fact, I hardly wanted to take a pill. Okay, I was not one of those people into take. I barely want to take one now. I would prefer to use a natural remedy over taking a whole bunch of pills from a doctor. So that's their teens doing that. I don't believe it's a lot of black teens doing that kind of stuff. Other family members and friends of patients and the black market. As a result, opioid overdose deaths trend upwards, sometimes involving opioids alone, other times involving drugs like alcohol, benzodiazepines. By 2015, opioid overdose death totaled more than 33,000. Close to 2/3 of all drug overdose deaths. And you can see on this chart from New York Times how it's trend upward. And they're now projecting that 65,000 people have died from drug overdose deaths in 2016, but those numbers will not be out until December. Seeing the rise in opioid misuse and death, officials have cracked down on prescription painkillers. Law enforcement, for instance, threatened doctors with incarceration and the loss of their medical license if they prescribe drugs. Yeah, well, we've seen this already. I already did a story on, was a woman doctor, a white female doctor, and she got arrested for writing all types of scripts for opioids for people that didn't even need them. So we have seen this already. And she lost her license. Okay, ideally, doctors should still be able to get painkillers to patients who truly need them. After, for example, evaluating whether the patient has a lot of history of drug addiction. But doctors who weren't conducting even such basic checks are now being told to give more thought to their prescriptions. Yet many people who lost access to painkillers are still addicted. Some who no longer obtain painkillers, so we know they turn to street drugs that can't get a script from their doctor. And we've heard that a million times. All right. That doesn't mean cracking down on painkillers is a mistake. It appeared to slow the rise in painkiller deaths, and it may have prevented doctors from prescribing the drugs to new generations of people with drug use disorders. Now, listen to this. This is what I found interesting. But a likely solution is to get opioid users into treatment. But listen to how many they got into treatment in 2016. According to a 2016 report by the Surgeon General, just 10% of Americans with a drug use disorder obtain specialty treatment. So the other 90% remained out here running around on drugs. And remember, only 50 to 90% of the time they are successful in kicking the habit. 50 to 90% of the time after treatment, they go back to the drug within the first week after finishing rehab. So it might be 10% that went through the treatment, but I bet you that number is very small as far as how many actually stayed off the drug after treatment, because most of them go right back to the drug. So treatment is really not effective in America. They have to really want to be off of the drug and go back to living a normal life. And that is extremely difficult. Okay, so difficult that the average drug addict does not achieve it. So federal and state officials have pushed for more treatment funding, including medication assistant treatment like methadone. Okay, well, some states such as Louisiana and Indiana have taken a tough on crime approach that focuses on incarcerating drug traffickers. But the incarceration approach has been around for decades, and it hasn't stopped the massive drug plague like the current crisis. So please don't come back with the black on black crime and post that. You guys don't see it, but I do when I go through the messages to approve them. They always got something in there, either pertaining to niggers and this and that. And niggers are not the problem in America, okay? The problem is the Caucasoid community and your drug addiction. That is the biggest problem in America. It's not black on black crime. It's not anything black people are doing, in fact. It is a Caucasoid American problem, and it is the biggest problem on earth. You just want me to talk about black on black crime so you can feel all good and fuzzy on the inside, and I'm not going to do it because that's not the leading problem in America, nor has it ever been the biggest problem in America. So I don't care how much you keep trying to talk about it, and your Nazi media keep trying to talk about it too, because I dismiss both of you. So if you are interested in black on black crime, then you need to seek out a coon on YouTube and go sit yourself at their channel and listen to them. But I have a certain agenda on my channel, and that agenda does not include black on black crime. And if I did want to talk about black on black crime, I will talk about that to black people only, not you. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to my channel, please do. Peace, family. Hey, I want to thank our queen, the Radical Home Goddess, for this article. And I just want to say, you know, at one point in time, New Jersey had one of the lowest rates for drug overdoses in the country. Not anymore. The state has definitely caught up, and drug overdoses are actually exploding in New Jersey. And doctors, just like everywhere else, have gone overboard, over prescribing to the Caucasoid community and under prescribing to everyone else, you know, with that, oh, you don't feel pain like we do stuff. But I want to take the time and thank the doctors out here for being racist and believe in that, because you spared the Black community this drug addiction. Doctors raked in cash to push fentanyl as New Jersey death rate exploded. The most powerful opioid ever mass marketed was designed to ease cancer patients into death. It's ideal for that. The drug is fast-acting, powerful enough to tame pain that other opioids can't, and comes in a variety of easy delivery methods, from patches to lollipops. But a dose the size of a grain of sand can kill you. Meet fentanyl. It's heroin on steroids. It's killing people in droves. And in New Jersey, you can get it after having your tonsils removed. In fact, doctors who treat children's colds and adult sore knees are prescribing it with alarming frequency, far more than oncologists easing end-of-life cancer pain. The surge is stoked by companies that shell out hundreds of thousands of dollars a year to doctors, wining and dining them in hopes of convincing them that their particular brand of fentanyl is the solution to all their patients' pain problems. Eventually, it's working. An advanced media analysis found that 8 medical specialties in New Jersey have filed more Medicare claims for fentanyl than those by oncologists. Family practitioners, for example, filed at least 5 times as many claims for fentanyl from 2013 to 2015 than did cancer doctors. There are some powerful drivers of opioid prescriptions that have little to do with the presence of pain in the population, said Dr. Caleb Alexander, co-director of the Center for Drug Safety and Effectiveness at Johns Hopkins University. The investigation also reveals from 2013 to 2015, doctors in New Jersey were paid at least $1.67 million by pharmaceutical companies marketing various forms of fentanyl. In the same time period, fentanyl deaths in New Jersey increased from 42 in 2013 to 417 in 2015. Wow, that's a hell of a jump in just 2 years. Since late 2011, enough fentanyl has been dispensed to allow every person who has died of cancer in New Jersey to fill a prescription for the drug 8 times. Doctors are being disciplined for improperly prescribing fentanyl, in several cases losing their licenses after patients die while taking the drug. So I know doctors are now, because I'm reading the articles, even recently in the paper, are now trying to cut back on prescribing so many opioids and fentanyls. But you still have doctors out here that are still prescribing it heavily because they don't want to lose that money from the pharmaceutical company. See, they become spoiled on the cash that they get from the pharmaceutical companies. Data and documents show a system where pharmaceutical companies and doctors remain in a cozy and ethically dubious relationship at best. It's a system where cash and prescriptions go hand in hand. And it's a system where time and again, patients suffer and even die when something goes wrong. an occurrence that is far from rare. So, you know, no matter how much they try to cut back, many of these doctors, they're going to continue to do it and even risk losing their license because they want the money. So listen, this is a doctor that received $95,000 bonuses, okay, that he got for treating his patients. So no, they don't want to give up that money. And a lot of times they get like free dinners for their whole family and all kinds of perks from these pharmaceutical companies. I mean, if you're used to getting that for years and years and years, then you don't want to give that up. And it talks about, okay, Perlman, who's one of the doctors, one of 6 in NSYS patients arrested late in 2016 for allegedly running a cash for prescription scheme that paid off and bullied doctors into improperly prescribing Subsys, one of the most powerful and addictive drugs on the market today. So it's a problem. I just don't know how they're going to resolve this whole plague that's going on. It just seems like as we get into reading more and more of these articles, there's no end in sight. I mean, what do? Do you just stop prescribing drugs altogether? You can't do that. Number 2, people have designed all kinds of crafty ways in getting drugs into the country. So that's difficult to stop. I just don't see them ending this whole thing. And it's already the number one way people die in the US now is from drug overdose. So I'm going to leave the link to this article in the description box. So, you know, you'll be able to come out and read it. It's quite lengthy, but it's definitely worth reading. Absolutely. So please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. 2 days ago, I did a story on a councilman in Ohio that wanted to do a 3 strikes rule for overdose victims because they are going out repeatedly over and over and over to the same people overdosing all week long. This story takes the entire cake, y'all. Thanks, Craig Jarrett, for sending this story. Police revive same man from an overdose 20 times. Can you imagine using Narcan on the same person 20 times because that's how many times they've overdosed? An Ohio police officer says one man has been revived from an overdose by naloxone 20 times by police. So that's 20 different calls because this person overdosed. But he still disagrees with a city councilman who asks if it's possible for emergency crews to stop responding to drug overdose calls. And these are repeat offenders. So it's not overall all drug overdose calls, just the repeat offenders. An Ohio police officer says one man has been revived with the opioid overdose antidote, naloxone, 20 times by police. But he still disagrees with a city councilman who asks if it's possible for emergency crews to stop responding to drug overdose calls. Dayton Police Major Brian Johns tells the Dayton Daily News, law enforcement took an oath to protect life. Oh my goodness. Really? Well, y'all must have amnesia on them oaths when you're dealing with black folks. But okay. Comparing the situation to a first responder not doing CPR on an obese person because they have poor dietary habits. Middletown City Councilman member Don Pickard said last week arresting people who overdose increases the burden on taxpayers and strain the court system. You know, it's amazing how they react like grabbing one of these junkies and putting them in jail is like kryptonite. That's all they did during the crack epidemic and was happy to do it. But it's almost like a sin for them to even think about jailing these heroin addicts. You know why? Because it will automatically trigger white mass incarceration, and they know it. This is why they are doing everything going above and beyond not to mass incarcerate these heroin addicts, because they will literally be the only ones in jail. They'll be the biggest population there. Everybody else will be small in size. And they're not about to let that happen. They don't want to mass incarcerate caucasoids. But it's happening already. If you remember, I did a story on now white women are outnumbering black women in arrests. And a lot of it is due to the drug addiction, because they end up committing crimes out of desperation and trying to get their hands on the drug. Pickard is standing by his comments. We need to put a fear about overdosing in Middletown. So there you have it. You got one man that have to be revised up to 20 times by the police because he has overdosed that many times. That is outrageous. Okay, I don't know how any city budget would survive, and I'm sure he's not the only one. They have to go out to multiple times. That's why this councilman is making the suggestion. So you factor in all the other people that are repeat offenders and need Narcan several times in a week. That's outrageous. That is very expensive. And now you're talking about Narcan. The pharmaceuticals are now going up on the price on top of everything else. I don't know. Tell me what you think in the comment section, everybody. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, fam. It seems like the newer forms of fentanyl that are being found in the country are so deadly. The Narcan does not even work anymore. Fentanyl found in Georgia resists life-saving naloxone antidote. And that's, believe me, it's not going to just stay in Georgia, it's going to spread. The U.S. opioid plague shows no signs of slowing down, with the demand for the drug creating an entire market of illegal synthetics that are even more dangerous and deadly than heroin. Some are even resistant to emergency opioid antidote drug known as Narcan, naloxone. One Wednesday, officials at the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, Crime in Cleveland, Georgia, said they have identified 2 new naloxone-resistant strains of fentanyl analogs, crofentanyl and tetrahydrofuran fentanyl, as reported by the Times Free Press. It is unknown how the human body will react to both drugs since they are not intended for human or veterinarian use. The agency said in a press statement, both of the drugs are so potent they can be absorbed through the skin, meaning overdose is likely. You know what? That's all the more reason why I would never want to be a cop, any type of emergency responder around these drug addicts and drug dealers. You are taking your life in your hands when you go out there You don't know what they have. You don't know what type of fentanyl has been laced in the drugs. You may not go home, because of dealing with these junkies and drug dealers. According to WTXL, the krill fentanyl has also cropped up in Cooks County, Illinois, where it was said to be the cause of 44 overdose deaths so far this year. According to GBI, krill fentanyl has been on the authorities' watch list for the past few months. In May, the DEA issued a warning on krill fentanyl, which officials says is manufactured overseas. In May, the agency added the synthetic to its Schedule I list of controlled substances, at least temporarily. Officials say the discovery and identification of tetrahydrofuran fentanyl is even more concerning, as the drug isn't currently on the DEA's list of banned substances. In April, lawmakers in Georgia passed legislation banning the sale and possession of krill fentanyl in the state. Currently, tetrahydrofuran fentanyl is not covered under Georgia's law. Fentanyl drugs are a class of powerful synthetic opioids that are 50 to 100 times more potent than morphine, according to the National Institute on Drug Abuse. When used legally, these drugs are prescribed by doctors to treat severe pain, especially post-surgery. Fentanyl is sold under prescription names including Actic, Duragesic, and Sublimase. Street names for fentanyl and fentanyl-laced heroin include Apache, China Girl, China White, Dance Fever, Friend, Goodfella, Jackpot, Murder 8, TNT, Tango, and Cash, according to the NIDA. The drugs are relatively easy to purchase on the internet and imported from China. And see, this is why so many people are not going to the Mexican cartels as much, because China will ship this right to your house. So you don't have to run the risk of being caught with drugs in a car or in a truck, or, it comes right to the house. And I don't believe it's a coincidence that dogs cannot detect the drug. I don't think that's a coincidence. I think they have perfected the formula so much that they know how to get it past the drug sniffing dogs. And you got to really think about it. How safe is it to even use a drug sniffing dog these days? Because if the chances are, if they're going to sniff out fentanyl and certain other powdery drugs, they're going to just die. You're really just, technically, you're just killing these dogs. So I don't know. I don't know how beneficial it is to use a drug sniffing dog anymore, especially for heroin bust, or if you're going to bust someone with fentanyl, because you're literally going to just kill the animal. The drugs are relatively easy to purchase online and imported from China. According to the U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, the death rate from synthetic opioid overdose has increased by nearly 75% from 2014 to 2015. The data includes all synthetics, such as Astramidol and fentanyl. Last year, Life Science reported that deaths from fentanyl have doubled in a single year. In 2014, 4,200 people in the U.S. died from overdoses involving fentanyl, compared with 1,905 people in 2013. In short, the rate of fentanyl deaths increased by 6 deaths per 1 million people to 13 deaths per 1 million people during that 1 year period. They are never going to get this thing under control. Never. But see, Opium is nothing new to the United States. Many of you, the white people's forefathers, they were junkies too. Don't think for one moment that these nuts on the plantations and these politicians, they were junkies too. They came here with all that opium and all that stuff. So drugs have always been part of the U.S. from the beginning. So it's not shocking that there's a drug epidemic in the very place that had drugs from the beginning. Hey, please leave your comment and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Before we get into this article, I just want to tell you something that I was laughing about yesterday. I had pulled up a few articles on fentanyl. And I looked down in the comment section. Do you know the majority of the caucasoids in the comment section were saying they think this entire plague is a hoax? It's not really happening. It's a hoax. I said, that's good. That means that you're not going to be paying attention. And by the time you do pay attention, the damage will be already done. The damage is really done now. Okay? Because they sure can't reverse it. But they're sitting around talking about it's a hoax. And it wasn't just one person. It was probably the majority of the people in the comment section saying this. They don't believe this is really happening. They believe it's a hoax. That's fine. It makes it that much sweeter when you fall. This article just came out on Stat News, June 27th, 2017. Stat forecasts opioids could kill nearly 500,000 Americans in the next decade. The rate they're going, I don't know. Do they even have a decade? Opioids could kill nearly 500,000 people across America over the next decade as the crisis of addiction and overdose accelerates. Deaths from opioids have been rising sharply for years, and the drug overdoses already kill more Americans under age 50 than anything else. Stat asks leading public health experts at 10 universities to forecast the arc of the plague over the next decade. The consensus, it will get worse before it gets better. It ain't going to ever get better. There are now nearly 100 deaths a day from opioids, a swath of destruction that runs from Tony, New England suburbs on the farm country of California, from the beach towns of Florida to the Appalachian foothills. In the worst case scenario put forth by Stat Experts panel, that toll could spike to 250 deaths a day if potent synthetic opioids like fentanyl and carfentanil continues to spread rapidly, and the waits for treatment continues to stretch weeks in hard-hit states like West Virginia and New Hampshire. If that prediction proves accurate, the death toll over the next decade could top 650,000 people. Wow. That's almost as many Americans as will die from breast cancer and prostate cancer during that same time period. Put another way, opioids could kill nearly as many Americans in a decade as HIV/AIDS has killed since the plague began in the early 1980s. The deep cuts to Medicaid now being debated in Congress could add to the desperation by leaving millions of low-income adults without insurance, according to the nonpartisan Congressional Budget Office. Even the more middle-of-the-road forecast suggests that by 2027, the annual U.S. death toll from opioids alone will likely surpass the worst year of gun deaths on record, and may top the worst year of AIDS death. At the peak of the epidemic, in the 1990s, when nearly 50,000 people were dying each year. The death toll across 10 forecasts, nearly 500,000 deaths over the next decade. Beyond the immeasurable pain to families, the overdoses will cost the U.S. economy hundreds of billions of dollars. See, this is why you're hearing about the article that I did before about the lawmaker saying, cut these people off. They're a drag on all of the resources, and they really are. All right, so this is their prediction chart. Wow. Okay. All right, a sort of interactive chart. All right. Okay. In addition to the forecast provided by academics who specialize in epidemics, so what they're talking about is clinical medicine, health economics, and pharmaceutical use stats. Conducted more than 40 interviews with politicians and patient advocates, providers, and payers, doctors, and drug makers. This analysis is also informed by a review of presentations from top Trump administration health officials, including Health and Human Services Secretary Tom Price, National Institutes of Health Director Francis Collins, and the acting chiefs of the Office of National Drug Control Policy, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. It took us about 30 years to get into this mess. Robert Volek, professor at the University of Colorado, Denver School of Pharmacy and Pharmaceutical Sciences, told Stat, I don't think we're going to get out of it in the next 2 or 3. I don't know what that, I don't think we're going to get out of it in the next 2 or 3. Oh, he's talking about decades. Okay. Woo. Okay. That's pretty bleak. If you think you're going to go a few more decades with this plague, it's not going to be anybody left. It's already so bad that once unthinkable scenes of public overdose are now common. People are dying on public buses and inside of fast food restaurants. They're collapsing unconscious on street corners and in libraries after overdosing on prescription pain pills, heroin, and fentanyl. A customer in Anchorage, Alaska, hit the floor on a subway while trying to order a sandwich. A mom in Lawrence, Massachusetts, sprawled in the toy aisle of the Family Dollar as her little girl screamed at her to wake up. A grandmother in Liverpool, Ohio, slumped in the front seat of an idling car, turning blue, while a toddler in dinosaur pajamas sat in the back seat. There are so many deaths. Some coroners are running out of room for bodies. The recent national statistics count more than 33,000 opioid-related deaths across the U.S. in 2015. Many victims are young, often in their 20s or 30s. Increasingly, many are white. But the plague touches, they said the word plague, y'all, woo! But the plague touches all demographics, farmers and musicians, lawyers and construction workers, stay-at-home moms, and homeless. I told you, they kept saying it was the whites without education, or the ones that had high school or less. But now you see it's clearly across all economic lines. So it's no longer just poor people and deaths of despair. It's hitting even lawyers and construction workers and all that. Okay. Most of the forecasts produced by STAT predict the annual death toll will increase by at least 35% between 2015 and 2027. Under the gravest scenario, it could triple to more than 93,000 deaths per year. Oh my God. These people, they ain't gonna make it, y'all. They are not gonna make it. On this, all experts agree fatal overdoses will not even begin to level off until sometime after 2020, because it will take time to see whether the federal government efforts to boost drug enforcement and push doctors to write fewer prescriptions for opioid pain pills are effective. It ain't going to work. If they can't get the pain pills from the doctor, they're going to go in the streets and get the heroin. We're already seeing that happen now. And plus, what are you going to do with China shipping all the fentanyl over here by mail that can't even be detected by dogs? Okay, they can't detect it at all, even with their best equipment. The worst case scenario is built around the assumption doctors will continue to freely prescribe and that people addicted to opioids will continue to be exposed, perhaps unknowingly, to powerful synthetic compounds like carfentanil and an elephant tranquilizer capable of killing a human with just a couple of grains. Okay. The best case projection has fatal overdose falling below 22,000 a year by 2027, but experts say reaching that level could require a major public investment in evidence-based treatment options and a concerted push among medical providers to control pain with non-narcotic therapies before trying prescription opioids. Right now, the U.S. spends about $36 billion a year on addiction treatment, and just a fraction of those in need are getting better. Many of them don't. The vast majority of them don't. Okay, they can't kick their habit. It is really very difficult for them to do that. By contrast, federal officials estimate that opioid abuse drains nearly $80 billion a year from the American economy because of expenses tied to the health care, criminal justice, and loss of productivity. This is, again, why you're going to hear more and more of these politicians talking about letting these people go. Okay, like I said before, not unless they got a bottomless pit of money that we don't know about. That's a lot of money to go through every year. 80 billion, we're already up to 51 billion a year. So if they're estimating it can go up to 80 billion a year, these people dragging down the economy by that kind of money, whew. Hey, y'all, if we do our boycott on top of that, America's gone. Think of something, black people. Think of something. President Trump, who has vowed to make opioids a priority, has appointed a commission led by New Jersey Governor Chris Christie to explore solutions, but it hasn't yet laid out its idea. And in the meantime, the administration proposed budget would slash most domestic spending, which health advocates call profoundly counterproductive. Are we doing enough of what we think works? Prescription drug monitoring programs, medication-assisted treatment, naloxone, asks Dr. Ronald Burke, Dean of the University of Pittsburgh Graduate School of Public Health. And Burke said, are we matching the socialite costs with like expenditures in prevention? So, I mean, they're hoping to get the deaths down, but right now I can tell you, I really don't think it happened. It's going to happen because the more a drug addict can't get a hold of the opioid pills, they just won't go out to the street drug. I mean, you're only talking about stopping it at the doctor level. I mean, you're not talking about stopping it at the street level, which is impossible. America has never stopped drugs from coming in. So what if you close it off at the doctor's level? If you still got all the drugs on the street, how is that going to put a dent in anything? I'm just saying. The Stats Analysis Project, many painful years ahead, the roots of the crisis through stretch back generations to the 80s, when pharmaceutical firms first marketed prescription opioids like oxycodone and hydrocodone to treat pain and claimed they carried minimal risk for addiction. Over the years, these companies pushed hard to get pills in patients' hands with strategies that included paying middlemen to circumvent state regulations and allegedly bribing doctors to prescribe opioids. The results are staggering. Opioid prescriptions nearly tripled between 1991 and 2011. It has been abundantly clear in recent years that such prescriptions can be dangerous. From 2005 to 2014, the rate of opioid-related emergency department visits nearly doubled, according to a new report from the Agency for Healthcare Research and Quality. Yet, recently in 2015, doctors prescribed prescription painkillers to more than a third of American adults, despite limited upsides for many patients. It's like cigarettes in the 50s. We look back at the way people smoked and promoted cigarettes as laughably backwards. Magazine ads with doctors saying physicians prefer Camels. Dr. Michael Bennett, assistant professor of health policy and management of Harvard University, said, "We have the same thing now. Oxycontin ads in medical journals where doctors say opioids are good for treating pain. They don't have addictive potential. It's possible 20 years from now, we're going to look back, and I cannot believe we promoted these dangerous, addictive medications that are only marginal, more effective." Shoot, 20 years from now, you may have a whole new drug out there. They come out with these new drugs all the time. The state of Ohio, among a handful of governments currently suing drug makers, allege that a well-funded marketing scheme led to its residents receiving 3.8 billion opioid pills from 2011 to 2015, fueling human tragedy of epic proportion. Fatal drug overdoses in Ohio have soared by 642%. Wow. Wow. Since the turn of the millennium. Another statistic, the number of privately insured patients diagnosed with opioid dependence increased nearly six-fold in just 5 years, according to data compiled by Amino, a healthcare data analytic company. In 2012, only 241,000 such patients had an opioid dependency diagnosis. By 2016, that number was 1.4 million. And those numbers don't account for the hundreds of thousands more battling addiction while on Medicaid or Medicare, or while uninsured. Wow. The surging death toll affecting growing numbers of white Americans sparked demand for action in ways unseen during past epidemics that disproportionately affected minority populations. Duh, I wonder why. Law enforcement officers started shutting down pain clinics known as pill mills, where doctors accepted cash for painkiller prescriptions. But That only accelerated demand for heroin as pill mill patients had trouble finding treatment to break free from their addiction. Desperate to keep feeding their cravings and avoiding the anguish of withdrawal, people from all walks of life, soccer moms in Vermont, C-suite executives in California, college-bound kids in West Virginia began to shift from prescription pills to heroin, which was more potent and had become far cheaper thanks to heightened drug trafficking into the U.S. by cartels. 2 years ago, heroin deaths surpassed the toll from prescription opioids for a first time this millennium, according to the Washington Post. 30 years ago, the heroin dealers drove through Arkansas on their way to more populous and lucrative markets. Dr. G.R. Richard Smith, professor of psychiatry, medicine, and public health at the University of Arkansas for Medicine, Medical Science, told Stats. That's not the case now. People are switching from legal prescription meds, rightly or wrongly prescribed, to heroin. Yeah, because that's what's going to happen. I mean, they keep talking about stopping the doctors from writing so many scripts, but what they're leaving out is, what about the street drug? If they can access the street drug, how is that going to slow them down? It's not. And they have no incentive of getting off of these drugs when you're coddling them and saying it's a public health issue. If I was an addict and you kept patting me on the head saying it's a public health issue and allowing me to stay on the streets to get the drugs, why should I get off of them? These people are really silly. Let's see what it says towards the end. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to leave this link in the description box, and you can go out here and access this article and read through it. And it's just going over like certain towns and how many overdoses that they have and 911 dispatches and things like that. So, and we all generally know that, you know, that's the case from my previous articles on opioids. So it's not getting better. So now they're talking about the death tolls are nearly 100 per day. So it's not getting better, y'all. It's getting worse. And to be honest with you, I don't care how much they keep holding back on the scripts. These people are going to find a way to get to some type of alternative drug. It's just going to make fentanyl and the carfentanil more popular. And of course, the heroin. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. And I also want to say thank you for all of you that have become patrons and also given donations on GoFundMe. Your help is deeply appreciated, and you just can't imagine how much I love and appreciate each one of you that have helped out. Peace, family. I want to thank Craig Jarrett for sending this story. And, you know, I kind of knew this was going to happen, and I have spoken about this before, where the addicts are such a strain on the economy, where you may have to let a lot of them go, especially if they keep repeating their overdose over and over, which many of them are. And even the emergency rooms are saying they see the same person overdosing several times in 1 week. You know how much, you can imagine the amount of Narcan they got to use on just that one person. And if they're using fentanyl, that takes even more doses to bring them back. If they can bring them back, because in many cases, they don't even respond to the Narcan and they just go. And if you remember, I did an article saying that it's costing $51 billion just so they can run out here and keep trying to help these people. I mean, you have to think about all the ones that go to rehab and they're using insurance and they fail. So now you're dealing with a situation with them running back out to the drugs. The police, you got to pay the fire department, the EMTs, and they're constantly in and out of these emergency rooms. And you got to think about some of them need a hospital stay. You got to get the coroner's office involved, the medical examiner, the autopsy. And there are some states like West Virginia that do burials for these people. It's a major strain. And then you got to also set funding aside just so you can keep a stockpile of Narcan available. And you're treating the same people over and over and over and over. That is a strain. And they are a public nuisance. They're all over the road causing accidents and deaths. They're running people over. They're killing people on the highway with their cars. It's ridiculous. And drug driving now has long surpassed drunk driving. It's a major strain on the economy. And then you also got to consider the fact many of them don't have jobs because they're junkies. So that's less money going into the economy and they're straining the resources. Ohio lawmakers suggest letting people die if they overdose twice. It's a third strike, no ambulance for you. An Ohio councilman believed that having an opioid addiction should be a death sentence. He wants to create a 3 strikes policy in which anyone that states Middletown who has overdosed twice before would not receive emergency care because it's costing the city too much. Dan Pickard told the local Journal News, "I want to send a message to the world that you don't want to come to Middletown to overdose because someone might not come with Narcan and save your life. We need to put a fear about overdosing in Middletown." He asked the city to explore the legality of the proposal. This is about as sensible as Trump's opioid commission member and advisor Kellyanne Conway recently commented that the solution to the opioid crisis is will. What will? Your junkies are the weakest people in the world. They don't have no damn will. What is she talking about? And shows just about as much understanding of the disorder. It's because people are getting frustrated and they don't want to spend no more time on these junkies. And I'm telling you, you may think these people sound crazy now. Give it more time. They won't sound so crazy after all. It's going to be a lot of people jumping on this bandwagon. And I could bet there's probably a lot of people thinking that way right now. They just haven't come out publicly yet to say anything. But don't worry, Dan. No one wants to come to your nowhere little town to overdose, even if it's where best-selling hillbilly elegy author J.D. Vance grew up. People who are overdosing there are your neighbors and their friends, families, and loved ones, maybe even your own family members or their friends whom, given your level of compassion, are unlikely to discuss their problems with you. To be honest with you, I wouldn't want no junkie in my face, none of these whining about their problems to me. So, no, don't come whining to me either. Everyone tries to claim that people with addiction are outsiders or transients, But that's not what even a quick read of the journal news recent covers suggests. And people with addiction are not choosing to overdose repeatedly because they enjoy it. Yes, they do. Yes, they do. I read an article where heroin addicts said they love the way the high feels. It has a euphoric feeling like they're in love. They love that feeling. So that is false, what they just said. It's quite a hellish experience to be revived and put into a constant withdrawal, actually. Well, all drug addicts don't feel that way. Go and say rehab around them. I promise you, they'll cuss you out because they like being high. So I don't know who wrote this, but this author is full of shit. Instead, they're doing it because addiction itself is defined by the National Institute on Drug Abuse and Psychiatry Bible, the DSM, the compulsive drug use that continues despite negative consequences. Well, many of them are, addicted and it's compulsive, but I still say many of them enjoy that high. That's why when they run out of the opioid, they run out there to the heroin because they want to maintain that high. In other words, if fear, punishment, and consequences could stop addiction by definition, the problem wouldn't exist. We've tried for at least the past 100 years to fight a problem defined by its resistance to punish with whatever more punishment, in the same way that people with addiction continually up the dose in hopes that this time maybe they'll be able to feel okay again. Well, you were all into punishing the crack addicts. I don't feel anything for you. It doesn't work because it can't work. People with addiction takes drugs because they are attempting to cope with emotional pain, typically due to childhood trauma, mental illness, oh my goodness, economic and cultural displacement, or frequently all of the above. You see how they got an excuse for everything? When it was the crack addiction, it was no excuse. Every damn body went to jail. No excuse. They didn't want to hear nothing you had to say. Unbelievable. Adding more pain only adds more fuel to the addictive fire. No one would ever say we should stop reviving heart attack or stroke victims because they've kept eating French fries or because they didn't exercise as much as we all know we should. Yeah, but those are diseases. And I realize you classify an addiction as a disease, but see, the only reason why you're doing that is because it's impacting mostly Caucasians. When the addiction was mostly affecting Black people, you were calling it a crime. This is why it's very difficult for a large segment out in the public to feel sorry for you. And many don't. In fact, many of your own people don't feel sorry for you because I've seen it in these videos. They sitting there laughing and chuckling and even sometimes playing around with the addict. No one is suggesting that not treating lung cancer as a way to get people to quit smoking. That's totally different. And not treating people who were speeding when their car crashed. We don't suggest these things because we recognize the humanity of people who overeat and under-exercise, people who can't quit smoking, people who speed. No, you didn't recognize the humanity of the crack addict. And even when our mothers had babies that were addicted to crack, you called them crack babies. But I notice your babies, you're not quick to give them a name. We know that they're just like us. No, they're not. I am not like no heroin addict, and they're nothing like me. But until we recognize that, the same thing is true for other kinds of addiction. We're not going to make any real progress in cutting the death toll. No, you're going to have to make a tough decision, whether you got this argument or not. They are a strain on society, and they are not adding anything to society because, like I said, many of them are not working. They can't keep jobs because of their addiction. So not unless you got a bottomless pit of money, you better come up with a solution or that work. And plus, I think, right now I was reading there's a large turnover in police departments. They can't keep people like they used to. And I'm not going to be surprised if a lot of these jobs, people walk away from them because they're going to get sick of these addicts. Many of them are probably sick of them already. I mean, how much more are you going to keep treating the same people? It costs money when you walk into an emergency room or stay at a hospital because you now have breathing problems because of your overdose. It costs money to call ambulances to get you out to wherever location these addicts are that have overdosed. Even when they die, it costs the coroner and medical examiner offices because autopsies got to be done on all of these people. And you see what's happening with jobs. They can hardly fill positions like they used to because so many of these junkies are failing the drug tests. And those drug tests cost the company. If they're not charging you, it's charging the company for all of those failed drug tests. But tell me what you think. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. It's time for me to do another bank robbery video due to heroin addiction. And I'm just showing you robberies that were published for the month of June. Okay, I'm sure there are a lot more locally that just have not been published online. But as drug addiction grows, the robberies for banks, pharmacies, and even people's homes are going up because of these addicts. And this one comes out of Morristown. I believe this is in New Jersey. And this man robbed a TD Bank. It says right here, a former advertising designer who became addicted to heroin has been charged with robbing TD Bank in Manhattan 5 days before he allegedly held up TD Bank on South Street in Morristown for $688 last week, attorney said Wednesday. And there's a video here. I'm going to go ahead and play the video.
Zachary Zingali, a Morristown resident charged with robbing TD Bank in town on June 16th, has been ordered held in the Morris County Jail while the charges are pending.
I will just note that give an update to the state's filing. The defendant was also charged in New York City with a robbery, it's called robbery in the third degree. I understand it's a Class C felony, also for an alleged bank robbery.
Zingali also must undergo a substance abuse evaluation.
And for today's purposes, you're stipulating that probable cause does exist for the crimes you're charged with. Is that correct?
Yes. All right, Mr. Zingali, do you have any questions with me? I do not.
Okay, there you go. You see they are still out here robbing. He looks like such a goofball. And now you have this older guy right here, Virginia man confesses to 2 robberies, freeing innocent man from prison. And look how old this dude is. He's addicted to heroin. All right. It says Christian Amos turned himself in for old bank robberies, which he committed to meet his drug habit, and he got away with. He serves his sentence in Riverside Regional Jail now. All right, so he almost got away with murder. He literally had to confess. He's 63 years old. Wow. 63 years old. And it was another guy in prison named Gary Bush, 67 years old, who they actually pinned the crime on, but he didn't do it. This dude did. Drug addiction. Wow. And I will leave all of these articles in the description box, everybody, so you'll be able to look at them for yourself. And this is 2 men arrested for an Avoca bank robbery. All right. And you can see they're all covered up. And it looks like this robbery took place on the 21st of June. All right, and it says the FBI arrested 2 men early Thursday on charges stemming from a bank robbery that occurred just before 4 p.m. on Wednesday at PNC Bank at 650 Main Street, Avoca. Okay. Avoca, I guess. Douglas A. Sickler Jr., 36, of Hanover Township, and Sean James Kavanaugh, 35, of Wilkesboro. That's over in Pennsylvania. Okay, I know where this is. Were arrested according to the Avoca police. Okay. And it has them listed, when I pulled up robberies and heroin addiction, this one came up. So this is probably why these 2 robbed the bank, the PNC Bank over there in Pennsylvania. Wow. Okay, so here's another one. Prosecutors say police shooting of bank robbery suspect in Old Saybrook was justified. Okay. And this guy went in and robbed the bank. And of course, he got caught by the police SWAT team. And they actually killed him. I believe he got shot in the head. Okay. And this person was also known to be addicted to heroin. Again, I will leave this in the description box. And some of these guys have a long track record. These cops know who they are. Here's another one. This one's out of Kentucky. KSP make arrest in First National Bank robbery. Okay, and this guy looked like he robbed the bank on June 13th in Kentucky. And it says right here, I guess his name is Hupp, Charles A. Hupp. Hupp, 42 years old, was arrested without incident, lodged in the Carter County Detention Center, and charged with the following: robbery in the first degree, theft by unlawful taking of an automobile, so he stole a car, robbery in the second degree, attempted, persistent felony offender, possession of a handgun by a convicted felon, trafficking a controlled substance in the first degree, first offense, less than or equal to 2 milligrams of heroin and methamphetamines, drug paraphernalia, possession of a controlled substance in the second degree, 2 additional counts of being persistent felony offender and bail jumping in the first degree. So here's another junkie robbing a bank. And this last guy, heroin user, faces jail for robbing man and burglarizing homes. So he was breaking into homes. I don't know why they're not showing his face and they got him in this profile picture. They should be showing his face. A heroin addict faces jailed after he admitted robbing a man and burglarizing 2 homes. See, this is why I'm telling y'all, if you live, I don't mean no harm, but if you live in a neighborhood where there's a lot of caucasoids, you better be locking up every single day and night. Prolific criminal Sean Webb, 35 years old, confessed to a string of offenses between January and May. He remains behind bars until Friday, when a judge has promised him a prison term of note. Homeless Webb appeared via video link in Plymouth Crown Court from Exeter prison, and to admit robbing a man of cash on January 20th. All right. So he pleaded guilty of stealing the money and burglarizing this house, and he had a long battle with heroin. So again, please be careful, ladies and gentlemen, because as they start writing less prescription, they're going to become more desperate. They're not going to just stop at robbing homes and robbing banks. They're going to start snatching people's cash and money, purses, and anything they can get their hands on the streets. All right. So just be careful out there. Please leave your comments and subscribe. And if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. Okay, this is an article that comes out of News, Oklahoma, and it was published on June 23rd. This is a Midwest city doctor charged in overdose deaths of 5 patients. You know, there used to be a saying years ago that people would say a person was toe up from the flow up. Well, this woman is definitely that. Woo! Man, she's beat up looking. A Midwest city doctor was charged Friday in the overdose deaths of 5 patients accused in a murder case of unlawful prescribing excessive amounts of drugs to the victims. Reagan Ganaug Nichols, 57, is charged in Oklahoma County District Courts with 5 counts of second-degree murder. Nichols, an osteopathic physician, is accused of prescribing controlled dangerous substance to patients without a legitimate medical need and in quantities and circumstances that disregarded human life. See, this goes back to the video I did a while back talking about how they would overprescribe to Caucasoids and underprescribe to Black people because many of these white physicians believe that Black people don't feel pain like they do, which is laughable. But thank you to all Caucasoid physicians and non-Black physicians that hate Black people. You spared us this plague, and I want to thank you all personally. She has been banned from prescribing drugs since 2015. I appreciate the efforts from everyone who worked as a team to put this case together, Oklahoma's General Attorney Mike Hunter said Friday. The dangers associated with opioid drugs have been well documented, and most doctors follow strict guidelines when prescribing opioids to their patients. Nichols prescribed patients who entrusted their well-being to her horrifyingly excessive amounts of opioid medications. Nichols' blatant disregard for the lives of her patients is unconscionable. If convicted, Nichols face at least 10 years in prison on each of the 5 counts. Really, she didn't do nothing any different than a drug dealer. The charge is the latest example of prosecutors around the country working to deal with the opioid plague. And this is what y'all should be doing instead of trying to go after people over some damn marijuana. Jeff Sessions and Trump are trying to do. Get out of here with that mess. If you want to be effective, you go after all these prescribing doctors over-prescribing to cockazoids. A former Oklahoma City doctor pleaded guilty in 2014 to 8 counts of second-degree murder. Oklahoma County prosecutors alleged that doctor overprescribed pain and anti-anxiety medication to 8 patients. In 2015, a California doctor was convicted in second-degree murder case in the overdose deaths of 3 patients, according to news reports. Last year, a former pain doctor in Florida pleaded guilty in a manslaughter case over 2 overdose deaths, according to news reports. Opioids, the main driver of drug overdose deaths, were involved in more than 33,000 deaths in 2015. And opioid overdoses have quadrupled since 1999, according to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Some states, including Ohio and Missouri, have recently sued pharmaceutical companies over their roles in the opioid plague. How about taking responsibility? Isn't that what you say to everybody else? But you notice cockazoids don't do that at all. Last month, the state legislature voted to create a new Oklahoma Commission on Opioid Abuse. Hunter will chair the commission. Well, they didn't come out with no commission when the crack epidemic hit the country. They just threw all Black people in jail. I've got an opportunity as chief law officer of the state to bring focus to what I think is a nightmarish social and health issue and public safety issue in the state, Hunter told the Oklahoman. When there are cases in which there is clear culpability, in which the evidence supports criminal charges that related to opioid abuse, we're going to work those cases. According to investigators, Nichols prescribed hundreds of pills to each victim. See? Again, proves what I said in the past, overprescribing to cockazoids, underprescribing to Black people. But I'm glad she did it to her own people. She killed 5 of her own people. Nichols prescribed extremely large quantities of controlled substances in suspect combinations, including the most abused and sought-after prescription drugs on the street, to numerous patients with very little medical examination. An agent with the Oklahoma Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drug Control reported in a court affidavit. So you can see how, these doctors, some of them are still out here trying to prescribe because, see, every time they write a script, they actually get money from the pharmaceutical company for prescribing drugs to their patients. So now that they have to pull back on all the opioid prescriptions, they're losing a lot of money. These doctors are literally losing a lot of money because of that. And some of them, like this Nichols woman, they want to hang on to it. But I'm going to leave the article in the description box, and you can come out here and read it for yourself. But she went to jail Friday, and she's being held on a $50,000 bond. If she's a doctor, she should be able to easily get out on bond. Okay. Please leave your comments and subscribe, and if you can donate to this channel, please do. Peace, family. I have another story where an officer got exposed to a fentanyl drug and had to be taken to a hospital. This is starting to become commonplace because of the plague that's going on in the country. Fostoria cop treated after exposure to fentanyl drug, and this is in the Courier. And this story just came out June 23rd, 2017. A Fostoria police officer was accidentally exposed to the opioid fentanyl during an arrest Thursday afternoon, is recovering at home after being treated at a hospital. The patrolman came in contact with what is believed to be the powerful pain medication during a routine traffic stop near the intersection of West Lyle and South Main Streets in Fostoria. Fostoria Police Chief Keith Loreno said the officer pulled over 27-year-old Logan T. Parrish of Fenley about 5 p.m., and the officer discovered a large quantity of what is believed was fentanyl in the vehicle. The officer, who Loreno declined to name Thursday night, put on gloves before searching both the vehicle and the suspect. But during the search of the vehicle, the officer came in contact with the drug and began to exhibit symptoms of exposure. A second patrolman on the scene immediately called for Fostoria Fire Division EMS squad, which arrived minutes later and transported him to ProMedica Fostoria County Hospital for emergency evaluation. Paramedics gave the officer a dose of Narcan, an FDA-approved nasal spray that can reverse the effects of opioid exposure. The officer was treated by physicians and released several hours later. I can tell you the range of emotions I felt getting the call when we had an officer down as a result of this. I am extremely thankful he is home and recovering, Loreno said Thursday night. This just shows that we cannot be tolerant of those criminals contaminating our community with these poisons. Police cannot confirm the substance discovered inside the car was fentanyl until the Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation completes a lab analysis. However, Loreno said Parrish admitted that what it was. So apparently the guy that he had been transporting that in his car. So he just confirmed it. Fentanyl has played a large part in the deadly opioid plague. In an effort to deliver a longer, more powerful high, drug dealers often lace heroin with fentanyl. Since the drug can be produced and distributed in mass quantities, fentanyl has evolved into a cheaper alternative to heroin. According to the Drug Enforcement Agency, fentanyl is 30 to 50 times more potent than heroin and 50 to 100 times more powerful than morphine. The drug can potentially be lethal. even in small amounts. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention reports that Ohio experienced a 107.3% increase in overdose deaths related to synthetic opioids, such as fentanyl, between 2014 and 2015. The number of fentanyl-related overdoses in Ohio more than doubled, from 503 in 2014 and 1,155 in 2015, according to the Department of Health. In fact, unintentional drug overdoses were the leading cause of injury-related deaths in Ohio in 2015, ahead of motor vehicle crashes. If it hadn't been for those two officers, there may have been a lot of dead people in the area right now if Parrish was able to distribute it, Loreno said. I can't tell you how proud I am of the officers, whatever. Thursday incident serves as a reminder of the struggle police department, large and small, face as a result of the nation's soaring drug plague, with Fostoria Police Division already well below its staffing level. So I'm telling you guys, the understaffing of cops is nationwide, but they sure still know how to find their way to us to shoot, right? Loreno said there's a need for more officers on the road. It is as crucial now as it has been. And that's all he's just talking about. The Parrish was charged with felonious drug possession, but additional charges are pending. He is being held in the Seneca County Jail until his court appearance. So I believe this place is in Ohio, which is really having a terrible epidemic problem alone in that state, probably higher than anywhere else. But as you see, more cops are being exposed to the drug and overdosing just from searching cars and searching suspects. Oh well, but like I said, my prediction still stands. I believe many of these cops in the future are going to resign. It's not going to be because they're dealing with us, the Black community. It's going to be because of these drug addicts and all the risk of being around the drug. Please leave your comment and subscribe, and if you can, donate to this channel. Peace, fam. Ladies and gentlemen, this is an article